What's up, y'all? Hope everybody is well. All right. As you know, it is February 10th. All right. We are doing our thing. So, welcome to the Onyx Report. Okay. Looks like we are going well. We are on, let's see, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, we are on Twitch, and we are trying to come through on Instagram, but it is saying it has got a questionable connection. So, it's reconnecting. So, I hope everybody's well. We're here to get into it and try and figure out some things that I think are on the table that we need to go ahead and knock out. So first off, let me greet some of you that are here. Malika, what's going on? Damon, what's happening, man? Marvin, Miss Kalila, good to see you as usual. Rashid, Barry, what's happening? Hope everybody is doing well. Let me see. All right. Oh, okay. Looks like Instagram keeps tripping, but not sure what that is. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and get started nevertheless. Y'all know how I go. There we go. Instagram just kicked in and went out again. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, salute to everybody that's in here, that's doing your thing. Appreciate the support. And speaking of which, I like to go ahead and you know request that you continue to support the Onyx Report. And I'd like to do that first by honoring those that do. But in case you didn't know, this is the Onyx Report, where we uplift Black men and boys using critical analysis. And we start that uplift by first acknowledging those who have been in support of the channel the whole time. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we go. All right, just to check, could you guys hear any music with that? Looks like everything is a little paused here. It's just strange. It's like, I mean, this is weird. I can't seem to get on Instagram for some reason, and what seems to be going on YouTube is slow. Okay, now I'm seeing people come through. All right, so you could hear it. All right, beautiful. So we will go ahead and continue from here. Not completely sure what some of these issues I'm having are, but they are happening. And it wouldn't be a normal day if this wasn't kicking in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what to say. So that said, you know, it is what it is. Y'all know. These are the kind of days where you could just, kind of expect that this is how I go. Let me see here. And I do apologize. It's just a number of weird things going on, and it's starting to bother me. Anyway, support the channel. You can do so, as you can see on the screen, through Cash App, through PayPal, through Venmo, through Patreon. You can also do so through Super Chat right here on YouTube. So please make sure you do that as we try and get things going here. Right. And we will get to it right here. Man, this is strange. This is one of those days, people. So as I said, there's many ways to become a supporter. You can go ahead and look right there on YouTube. and you can click the join button right next to the subscribe button and go from there and support the show. And we can keep things moving as we try to do. We got a lot to go through tonight, and I think this is going to be a good one. I have some things I definitely want to put on the table, and I think that they will be of use to like-minded brethren who believe in what I believe, and that goes for the ladies too. If you have the inclination, I think I'll have some things for you tonight that will be of use to kind of help you frame where we're coming from and best explain why we do what we do. All right. So shout out to those who are in support. And we should be able to go from there. Appreciate that, Kwaku, for joining. Good to have you. Become a member. That's what we need. All right. And we will start with our Sacred Black Masculine series. A number of you reached out to me on this particular issue. I'm going to try Instagram one last time, and then I'm going to call it a day if I can't get a strong connection. Rashid, appreciate the Cash App. And considering I just updated my internet, I'm low-key pissed off that this is not working the way I wanted to. But nevertheless, we need to go ahead and start with the Sacred Black Masculine series in proper form because we have a number of brothers that need to be shouted out. And the Sacred Black Masculine series is basically a series that I created that acknowledges Black men who, although I argue do things every day like this, nevertheless exemplify the whole concept of the sacred masculine. Now, that basically means that how we define manhood is not limited to the stereotypes we've gotten from popular media. If anything, it includes a humanity that has always been the case, but has seldom been acknowledged, particularly in regard to Black men. So the Sacred Black Masculine series is just an acknowledgement for brothers who exemplify that humanity and the capacity to support, lead, and even sacrifice themselves for the betterment of others, particularly those who cannot do for themselves, right? 89 people here. Again, like, share, subscribe, support the channel, right? So this particular piece, as we can see here, title of the article you can find on abcnews.go.com, kidnapped 10-year-old saved by 2 sanitation workers on a pickup route. Those are the 2 gentlemen on the left, as you can see. And the one who actually kidnapped a young girl is pictured on the right. I believe his name is Michael R. Ariel. But these 2 Louisiana sanitation workers are being hailed as heroes for saving a 10-year-old girl who had been abducted from a family member's home. The girl, Jaleesa LaSalle, had gone missing from a family member's New Iberia home Sunday between 1 and 2. According to the New Iberia Police Department, investigators initially believed she was in imminent danger. An Amber Alert detailing a gray 2012 Nissan Altima that Jaleesa had last been seen getting into was issued in the middle of the night. Pelican Waste and Debris workers named Dion Merrick and Brandon Antoine knew something was amiss when they spotted a silver sedan in the middle of the field about 20 miles away in St. Martin Parish while on their trash pickup route Monday morning. Right? Crispus, appreciate the Cash App support. Something told me, Merrick said. I said, what's that car doing off in the field like that? They then used the garbage truck to block the car from escaping and called the police. I blocked the truck and making sure he couldn't get out. So from there, they saved this young Black girl, right? So interesting, because I've been hearing, at least on YouTube for the last few years, that Black men don't do such things. They're not heroic. They don't sacrifice for people. They don't care about kids. They don't care about wives. I even heard in grad school classes that they don't care about being fathers. These were graduate school classes in African American studies. You let that process, right? You let that kind of marinate in your head and tell me where you go with that, right? But those were the kind of things that I was being taught, while every day seeing Black men doing things that were going ignored. And this is no different. Appreciate that support, D-Rock. Thank you. Right. So, these kind of situations are not new, despite that they're treated as such. And people tend to be somewhat oblivious to that for some strange reason, right? So that's the first thing, and need to kind of go from there. So support to these two young brothers. Appreciate them doing what they did. But this is another story I thought needed some attention too, right? This is a young brother who is doing some amazing work, and I thought that I would go ahead and allow the story to speak for itself. Although, oh wow, seems that StreamYard has erased a couple of things. So this, and I'm telling you, when I first started looking into doing YouTube videos, the people I really liked listening to made this stuff look easy. And I am going to tell you, it is not. There's a lot of moving parts.
So let's start with a review.
There's nothing unusual about Marcus Flynn's 5th grade science lesson today.
Do I eat chili with sugar? No.
But the fact that he's the one teaching it is pretty rare.
And there's very few black teachers. Nationally, only 2% of teachers are black men. In the state of Minnesota, it's even worse. So I figured if I want to make the biggest impact, have the biggest benefit on my community, best place for me to do is in the classroom.
And for Flynn, the classroom is just the start. He's also the executive director of Black Men Teach, an organization focused on building a pipeline for creating and retaining black teachers. People like Keith Durham, a junior at Hamlin University and member of Black Men Teach.
In my head, like being from Minnesota, a teacher is older Caucasian lady.
Durham, who grew up in St. Paul and Woodbury, says he never liked school. But looking back, he thinks it's because no one understood what he was going through outside of the classroom.
When I was in 2nd grade, my dad went to prison. It would have been a big push for me to actually focus on school and somebody to tell me, like, you don't need to just play basketball or be a rapper. Like, there's actual jobs out here that are in need of your services.
It's hard to make an argument that there's anything more important to the success of black students than black teachers.
The impact is tangible. Research shows that students who have 2 black male teachers in elementary school are 32% more likely to enroll in college.
One black teacher by 3rd grade can decrease the likelihood of a student dropping out of high school by almost 40%. Relationships are so important in education, and I think that's the thing we have to focus on.
And those relationships are important for white students as well.
Students who don't identify as black, it helps them rethink their understanding of what black men are in society.
Just having that simple saying of you can do it and you can achieve something, I think does tremendous work.
But it creates generational change, generational impact. All right, y'all, it's time to go. I'm gonna start booting y'all.
Erin Hasanzadeh, WCCO 4 News.
Suhail, go ahead.
So tell me, could you guys hear that? That was the first time I used that particular feature. So I'm hoping you guys could hear it okay. Anybody tell me? Just let me know in the chat real quick if you guys could hear it all right. Anybody? I think YouTube has me on some kind of slow mode. So okay, good. Yeah. See, they're slowing down the comments and everything, so they're coming in bunches. What's up, Artisan? Good to see you in here. Good, appreciate it. So shout out to this young man. Black Men Teach. Definitely support it if you can. Like I said, brothers are out here. We are doing work, but much of the time it doesn't get acknowledged. And it doesn't it's not often put on the platform it needs to be put on. But even when it is, it can kind of come and go real quick. So we actually have to take a moment to acknowledge when these kind of things happen. So shout out in regard to those two things, right? So let's go ahead and transition further. All right. Okay, so we go ahead and check out some of these special shout outs we got going this week. A couple of things that I thought deserved some acknowledgement, right? First off, we have a piece by a good colleague of mine, Dr. Travis Harris. And this is a blog piece that he did. Well, actually, it's a magazine article piece that he did on DominicMag.com. Definitely support Dominic Mag. It's DOMINIQUEMAG.com. Dominic was the first to do a piece on the launching of the Institute for Black Male Studies, so I am definitely a fan, and I want you all to support his magazine. This is a brother doing some brilliant work, especially in regard to Black men. But in this particular piece, Dr. Travis Harris, wrote a piece Friday, January 29th, where he talked about his experiences healing from Black feminism. And that is the title of the article, Forgiveness and Healing from Black Feminism. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will read some choice elements of it. He says, when I first started learning about it, and I think he's talking about Black feminism and intersectionality, it was new and exciting because I was a new grad student. I was on the way to becoming a doctor. If I wanted to be smart, I needed to queer my analysis and be fully inclusive of Black women, LGBTQIA folk, and individuals with disabilities. I was challenged. I appreciate that. So welcome to the Brotherhood, Show Me. He said, I was challenged to deal with my sexism and my role in perpetuating it. Honestly, as a Black man raised by a single mother, I rocked it. I rock with it. The biggest thing that hit me the hardest was how they talked about Black men, though. I posted about my conference experiences on Facebook at these academic conferences, presentations after presentation, said that Black men were blamed and made out to be the oppressors. Repeatedly, they were putting down Black men. It seemed that Black men became the punching bags, whipping posts, scapegoats, and poster children of all Black women's problems and issues. While being a graduate student attending these conferences and hearing how Black men were the problem, I was always treated in similar fashion. So check out this article. And it does explain the experiences of many, I would argue, Black male PhDs, right? This kind of took over as a trend, especially in the last 15 years. And I can speak to the same thing. I attended not only Black conferences, but Black conferences in Africana Studies. And I can tell you what I started to do probably about 6 years ago, I actually started to count. I'd go through the programs and count the number of lectures that focused on Black men and focused on Black women. And it would range from 8 to 1 to 10 to 1, in terms of the number of presentations. And the demographics of the conference were about the same. But the uptick in the feminism of these conferences and the focus was one of the things that got to me. And just like Dr. Harris is talking about, the idea that Black men were the problem seemed to be a running theme, even though, and you'll see this later in the broadcast when we talk about some other things, there was often no data presented. It was mostly anecdotal, opinion-based, and yet somehow there was this cross-the-board agreement that Black men were the problem. And if you yourself wanted to advance, you had to find some way to either not challenge that or support it wholeheartedly. And that applied especially, and it still seems to, for many of the Black male graduate students I run across. Many of them contact me per year asking under the table if I'll either be on their PhD committees or if I can help them navigate, because usually they're dealing with some kind of feminist, Black feminist board or Black feminist dissertation committee members that they cannot get around having, who are ardently, misandrist in how they present. And many of these young brothers are stuck dealing with them and have to appeal to them if they want to graduate. And when you become a faculty person, up until you get tenure, you got to do the same kind of thing. And the hardest point is actually getting hired, because many of these committees are filled with Black feminists that will first and foremost sidestep you to find a female feminist, then a male feminist. And if you don't necessarily present yourself as having an opinion on gender, you're kind of at the bottom of the pile. But if by any means you advocate for Black males, it's a problem. Appreciate the support, Mahir. Thank you. So this ends up becoming an issue that affects the pipeline for that. The unfadable, appreciate that support. It affects the pipeline, and it makes it difficult for Black men to navigate into the academy and even advocate for other Black men. Right. So this becomes a problem, and it's a consistent one. So shout out to Dr. Harris for putting this piece forth. Support the piece. Support Dominic Mag, and let's move further. Right, like I said, we got a lot to cover. Here we go. Okay, some of you have seen this particular one, this piece that was out. Right, this is shopblack.us, and this particular shout out goes to these two brothers. Now I know I'm going to mispronounce at least one of their names, but it looks like Song Laurent and Dave Salvant. right? And this is in I guess they're saying Squire, the Black-owned barbershop app, is now valued at $250 million, right? In June, we reported that Squire, a Black-owned barbershop app and management platform, raised $34 million. On Wednesday, they announced another raise of $59 million in a round led by Iconic Capital. With the new financing, Squire has almost tripled its valuation, up from $85 million in June to $250 million today. They plan on using most of the capital to hire new sales and marketing professionals. According to a LinkedIn post from co-founder Song Laurence, they are looking for a VP of marketing to build out our marketing department and help us continue to fuel our rapid growth. The app, which was first developed to help customers book appointments, has evolved and added features such as payroll management, inventory tracking, and automatic rent collection for the barbers leasing chairs. Squire has also helped barbershops navigate COVID-related restrictions by allowing customers to book and pay for appointments using its mobile app, and by creating a virtual waiting room which lets patrons wait outside or in their cars and enter only when they receive an automatic notification that their barber is ready for them. That's tight. According to TechCrunch, Squire's revenue went from zero in March when all barbershops closed to between 10 and 20 million in ARR just 10 months later, right? So that is Squire. Check that out. Shout out to these brothers for building that. Hopefully we'll be able to see that progress. And I'm also hoping that they'll be able to help some others get on board, right? Particularly whether it's black marketing, execs or whatever, or barbers, hell. I hope the app will help, and I hope the capital they've raised, they'll be able to use to expand the capital of black business, or the framework for black business. So shout out to them. All right. Yeah, a little bit of a sad one on this one. Shout out to one Leon Spinks, who passed away at 67 years old a couple days ago. Former heavyweight champion Leon Spinks, best known for defeating Muhammad Ali in 1978, has died at the age of 67. According to a statement from his publicist, Spinks lost his 5-year battle with prostate and other cancers on Friday evening. Look, I want to shout him out. I want to acknowledge him. Spinks is somebody I remember seeing as a kid in the ring. To be honest, I wasn't sure he would make it to 67, just in terms of how he was living in the 80s, but he did. I wish him well. I wish his family well, but I will say this, especially to my brothers, please get pre-screened, for cancer, in particular, checked out in regard to your prostate. These are things that we avoid. There are tests for these kind of things. They're not hard to get hold of, but I would highly recommend you do so. And I say that knowing that I at times drag my feet as well. So I'm not suggesting this in any way as if it's not something I don't understand and I haven't done myself. But I do currently have a colon cancer test in my home that I'm going to do and send out. So make sure you do those things if you are at all able, because if they can catch it early, there are definitely things that can be done as opposed to finding out when it's way too late. So please make sure you get checked out, you stay on top of it, particularly after you get, to 35, 40 years old. When you get in that range, you really need to start getting different things checked out, most particularly colon, prostate, so on and so forth. So please make sure you get on top of that. And shout out to Leon Spinks. Like I said, condolences to his family. I wish him well. Indeed, Adam, boxing legend. But anyway, yeah, sad to hear it. On another tip, which is probably a little more upbeat. If you go to theroot.com, they have an article entitled Morehouse College to offer online program for Black men who have college credits but no degree, right? The school announced on Tuesday that Morehouse Online will go live this summer and will have 3 initial course offerings. The service is designed specifically for men who have some college experience under their belt and want to complete their degrees, which the Census Bureau estimates is over 3 million Black men. The program will be open both to former Morehouse students as well as men who went to other universities, and the school hopes to bring back at least 500 Morehouse men over the next 5 years. David A. Thomas, president of Morehouse College, told the Post that the idea came after speaking to former alumni at events who said they didn't finish and would like to, but simply didn't have the ability to put their life on hold to finish their education, right? So, yo, for those of you out there that are in that situation, you didn't complete, you got a few, you got a few classes left. And I don't know how many you need to have. I don't know where the line is, but it's definitely worth checking out. So reach out, go to Morehouse online, of course, do some research, and then, maybe even contact them directly and find out. But I would definitely urge people that if you can take advantage of this opportunity, please do so. As you guys know, on my show, we talk a lot about resources available to Black men, and it is staggering how few there seem to be. So when something like this pops up, I definitely think it's worth sharing. So please make sure you do. All right. Check out Morehouse online and see if it's something that you can use. Right. So definitely shout out to them for that. It's much appreciated. Right. Now, this one here. Laurence Fishburne to receive Lifetime Achievement Award at SCAD, a TV fest. I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know if I got that right or wrong. But this is a Variety.com article. And it says the Blackish star and executive producer is only the second actor to receive the honor from the Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD, after Felicia Rashad was awarded the Comparable Outstanding Achievement in Television Prize during the inaugural edition of the festival in 2013. A star on screen and stage, Fishburne began his acting career working in TV, landing a role on One Life to Live at age 10. In the more than 4 decades since, Fishburne has starred in CSI, Hannibal, Tribeca, from which he won his first Primetime Emmy in '93. He won his second Emmy as executive producer and star of Miss Evers Boys, earned an NAACP Image Award and Golden Globe and Emmy nominations for his work in the Tuskegee Airmen. And of course, we know his work in a number of other ventures like The Matrix. They don't ever talk about Cornbread Earl and me, but shout out to Laurence Fishburne. Much, appreciating them acknowledging the brother who definitely deserves it. I'm a fan of his work. I appreciate it. So, strangely enough, there's still not much said about the piece he did on never mind, I'm not going to go there. I don't feel like bringing that energy in, that Tina Turner film or whatever. I don't know if he still catches the flack that Danny Glover gets for his role in Color Purple, but it was definitely one of those roles that people do not forget. All right. All right, Cynthia, you know what I'm talking about. Cornbread. That's what's up. That's where I saw him first, But yeah, and I appreciate that, Adams. So Adam mentioned some of the other ones that that just popped up that they didn't talk about, right? Higher Learning. I definitely remember his role in Higher Learning. Hell, I remembered the point where I was just like the star of the film Higher Learning as an undergrad student. And then I remember the point where I realized I became the professor in the film. So it was an interesting transition for me, and I appreciate works like that kind of frame our lives. Okay. So nevertheless, we are now transitioning to some of our current events. And as usual, I got a few things that, will likely slap you in the face. Y'all know how I do. So we can start out with this one. This is an article you can find on clicktohouston.com, right? Cynthia, you're absolutely right. I didn't even say Boys in the Hood. Didn't even say Boys in the Hood. The moment where he actually became, this perennial Black father, much like James Evans and a few others in those choice positions, Boys in the Hood, no doubt. This article, however, will definitely make you a little whatever. It's entitled Mother Accused of Threatening to Kill 2-Year-Old Son with an Electric Drill. Now, I told y'all last year there's going to be a lot more of these crazy pieces, mainly due to the environment, the pressures people are facing. It's going to bring some things out. Definitely the need for mental health improvement, support, so on and so forth. Things are going to get crazy for real, right? So police say Amy Tangu was with her 2-year-old son at a community pool on Sunday, even when she completely, what the hell? Oh, okay. On Sunday evening, when she completely undressed the boy at a community pool, right? When witnesses asked her to put clothes on her son, she ran from the pool. Witnesses called the police, who went to her apartment. When officers arrived at the apartment, she was holding a drill to her son's head and was threatening to kill him. The officers, of course, grabbed her, tackled her, took the drill. I don't know about the tackling part, but they grabbed her and took the boy from her arms. She was then arrested and charged with endangering a child. The boy was put in child protective services. It's not known what will happen to him. Right now, y'all know I put these kind of things up, one, to acknowledge, um, what's going on during this pandemic, what's going on in terms of the impact it's having on families, and especially in regard to Black males. But I also do this because, Adam, appreciate you becoming a member, man. I also do it to also point out that as much as we've been hyper focused upon as Black men for whatever crimes are committed and so on and so forth, there's an obliviousness to female aggressors, whether it be on sexual grounds or even in terms of rearing children. There is an obliviousness that tends to happen. And so I point it out because this is very real, and especially when it impacts Black boys and men. So in this particular instance, you got a 2-year-old boy whose own mother threatens to kill him with an electric drill, right? The difficulty of dealing with these situations is astronomical at this point, but it's insane. So all I can say is if you're witness to something like this, definitely get involved. Maybe not directly. I don't want to push anybody into a situation where you get hurt, but sometimes you got to call in support, particularly when the kids need it. So, just like I said, when she embarrassed the boy at the pool, made him strip naked at a community pool, and then took him home and threatened to kill him. That kind of thing you need to call for support on, right? So keep an eye out for that kind of thing. Next up, this was an exchange that took place on Facebook that I wanted to acknowledge. What's up, Black Uru? I see you in here. Um, so as you can see, what they're talking about here, this is a post where a woman says, okay, I need y'all's honest opinions. She said, so I was being a hot girl last year and got pregnant. The guy who I thought was the father of my child signed my daughter's birth certificate. We got a DNA test done, and it came back when she was about 6 weeks old that he wasn't the father. Ever since then, I've been trying to get him to turn the paperwork in since I legally can't do it for him. My daughter is now 6 months old, and I'm trying to get a voucher for her to go to daycare. In the state of Florida, the father has to be on child support in order for you to get the help you need. Am I wrong for giving him until the end of the month to turn it in, or I'm going to file for child support? And then of course you can see the response from somebody in her comments saying, do not listen to the people telling you to take the L because they will not pay for your child care. He isn't doing what he needs to do to get himself out of the situation. So do what you need to and get what you need for your kid. All right. This is on the nicer end to some of the situations I've seen like this, because she at least asked the question. But I've seen other cases where in predatory fashion, women in these situations who even knew that the man wasn't the father didn't even ask the question. Is that to suggest that that's somehow all women? No. But I am saying overall, I think we do have a kind of practice of obliviousness when it comes to men, in particularly in particular to this kind of disposability, this interchangeability of Black men as fathers, as suitors, as boyfriends, as husbands. We have a culture of that, I believe, particularly in the Black community, where there are many who wouldn't even ask the question because men are interchangeable and they don't matter in a certain respect. So, look out for this. Be very careful. Strap it up best you can. Do whatever you need to do to protect yourself, fellas, because there are people out there that really don't care if you're the father or not. And this is why we advocate here for getting DNA testing done. It is what it is, fellas. Please be careful out there. because, as I said, this kind of thing happens, and it isn't. There isn't always a care for how this impacts you. And 18 years of child support, especially for a child that's not yours, yo. All right. So let me just get through this one quickly. This is not a film review. This is a new film that's out, Malcolm and Marie, starring Zendaya and John David Washington. And basically, look, I didn't watch the film. I'm not planning on watching it. I'm not telling you not to watch it. And as a matter of fact, I believe in supporting Black films. So if you don't have an objection to it, please support it and do so for me. But look, I saw the trailer. It was a long trailer. It was a trailer about what seems to be a long night of arguing back and forth, right? And when you've been through this shit enough times in real life, you don't want to sit down and pay for a movie where you got to watch two people do it. I'm sorry. I can't. I just don't have the energy. I finally got to a place in my life in my mid 40s where my day is peace. You know what I mean? From when I wake up to when I go to bed, I am in a drama-free, zone. Literally, I really am tempted to put a sign on my door. There's no drama allowed on my property. So even watching this film trailer was just kind of gave me some flashbacks about all night arguments over nothing. But so I'm just putting this out there. I can't do that shit. So if somebody's willing to watch it, you can tell me if I missed something, appreciate it. But at some point, I would actually like to see a film about a Black male who is happy. Wouldn't that be a revolutionary idea? A Black man who is actually happy. And I don't particularly care, if he's a high value man, if he's a student in school. I don't care. But I actually want to see a film where you don't have to walk into it gritting your teeth. That's one of the things I noticed even as a kid. Like, even Black movies were stressful. Like, even in the 80s. I remember one of the first ones I actually saw, it was like Penitentiary, one of Mr. T's earliest roles. And I was just like, I don't even know what this is, but it's stressful. Look, at some point, we got to be able to have some peace and some happiness. And I can't really, when I think about it, I really can't think of how many films I've seen, where a brother actually was enjoying his existence. You know what I mean? I can't really think of too many. So just putting that out there to all you writers, it would be nice to have some shit where a brother isn't going through hell. And I mean, like I said, the trailer alone gave me flashbacks. I was like, I think I'm still suffering from some form of PTSD behind that mess. Cold Type says it was a long night of arguing and toxicity with indirect shots at Black directors. Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah, MLR, agreeableness would be nice. And I can't say I've seen a lot of that, let alone anything beyond it. So it would just be nice to see some real, like, chill, stuff that doesn't have to be like tense and stressed out and whatever. Anyway, I just had to put that out there because man, I literally had a reaction watching the trailer. I'm serious. I can't do it. So now this is one you're talking about, Coming to America 2. And I finally saw the full long trailer for it, because prior to that they released, a little quick trailer. And this is one I can say, I won't say I was waiting for it because I didn't really think it was going to happen. But when I found out that it was, I was excited. I enjoyed the first one. It was hilarious. I love Eddie Arsenio. Their ability to play multiple characters requires incredible skill. So I appreciate all of that. But I saw a trailer for it. And yeah, man, the gynocentrism has definitely got to a whole nother series. It has. So in this one of the things that I remembered is, he had daughters. He finds out he has a son back in New York with the character played by, what's her name, Leslie Jones from Saturday Night Live. Yeah, that was, I don't know. I don't know on that one. But the son seems to be kind of buffoonish. It is what it is. I mean, this is, it's a comedy. I get it. But in this particular setting, they're talking about who's going to replace him at the throne. And there's this big question of why it has to be a male versus a female. So they're going, so it's the typical kind of feminist narrative, which threw me, but it is what it is. So this is what I'm just saying is on the table as far as this is concerned. It's, another venture, even, and this was funny to me, even in a fictitious Wakanda. This is pre-Wakanda. Like this what we saw going on and coming to America preceded. Well, it didn't precede in the comic books, but definitely on the screen. And yet, even here, we got to fight the patriarchy because Black men, no matter where they are the problem. So here we go, and it's exhausting to me. It's because I see so much of the same narrative in a lot of what I'm watching these days. And I mean like in the last decade. So but I'm sad to see it here. To what extent, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't seen it completely. But watch the trailer, at your own discretion. You tell me what you see. Go ahead and put it in the comments. But it looks to me like this kind of feminist gynocentrism has kind of overrun so many different projects, so many different series, so many different contexts. I mean, from employment to media to policy, there's such a central focus to women and girls to the extent that boys and men, especially in the Black community, have become somewhat oblivious. And so now we're seeing it in projects that are actually led by Black men. And of course, a lot of this has to do with catering to the female dollar, right? We know that statistically speaking, women tend to consume media to greater degrees than men. And we know in the Black community, at least until COVID, I'm waiting for, COVID data. And I'm told it may be a number of months until we really get to see what 2020 looks like in different contexts. But, at least up until COVID, Black women tended to be employed more consistently than Black men. So by that logic, it's understandable that so many different industries since the 80s have been targeting women and girls, and as in terms of finding this new gold mine of resources. And that's what's behind a lot of this gynocentrism. It isn't a value judgment that's based on a moral reflection on the degree to which women and girls have been oppressed by all men across the board. It's really a dollar thing, but it nonetheless shapes the media, which in turn impacts how people see the world and how people engage each other. And so again, and you guys have heard me say this repeatedly, when you have a 12-year-old son who can say he's never seen a boy or a man beat a woman or a girl at anything in media, that's a problem, right? Because it undermines the capability of boys and men, and it really dismisses their importance in society, right? And I think people are starting to figure out slowly how important boys and men actually are. If you actually go, there's an article I'm not going to cover, but my boy Gigi already did. And he's looking at China, and China is actually developing programs to support young men and really reinstitute masculinity in some way, shape, or form, because it's been so attacked. But again, the attack, especially when it's coming from a policy standpoint, is way more detrimental than just a bunch of people standing around talking about they don't like men. We're talking policy. We're talking, in the academy, it's almost become a religion to dismiss, undermine, and denigrate Black men and boys. Shout out M. Lavo. Appreciate the support. Hope I pronounced that right. So at the end of the day, there's more of this on the horizon. So I'm just alerting you to how some of your favorite series might be dealing with more of this than you might have suspected, right? So just to put it out there, it is what it is. Now, for my comic book heads, I'm about to take you back to the 1970s, right? This was a comic that came out when I was a kid, and it was a supersized comic. Like it might have been, it was, I don't know, 15, 17 inches tall. Like it was a supersized comic. And as a Black male and a boy in the 1970s, my hero, one of several, but definitely one of my biggest heroes, was Muhammad Ali. I even had like a 13-inch Muhammad Ali doll. I loved Ali, man. And so I also watched cartoons as anybody else. I watched Superman and so on and so forth, and I enjoyed Superman as a character. Never processed in my mind these two in the same universe at all. So then something interesting happened. This came out, and even as a kid, it knocked me on my behind because it brought two heroes that I had into the same space, and showed me what I would have thought impossible, right? Muhammad Ali knocked out Superman. Blew my mind, right? What I found out much later was that in doing this comic, the Nation of Islam sat down with DC Comics because they were concerned about the representation of Ali and by extension, black men. So in this particular story, they took away Superman. You actually see Muhammad Ali and Superman. I think they were walking around Harlem, I think it was. And, Ali was signing autographs or whatever. They get together, start talking. Then they're whisked off to an alien world and forced to fight. I think they had to represent Earth. Artisan knows this better than I do because I haven't read it in a while. But anyway, they took away Superman's powers and put him in the ring with Ali. And one person could represent Earth. So they had to actually fight it out. And then from there, the winner would take on this alien menace in the ring. And Ali kicked the crap out of him. And I was blown away seeing this, right? Very interesting thing. Why does this come to mind? Well, aside from me being an unapologetic geek, here's another couple clips there. If you didn't see it, interesting. You know what this does to a black boy? Like, it's just like, what? Anyway, something came out about a week and a half ago, I think it was. Appreciate the support, Barry. Yeah. So a new film came out, animated piece called Batman: Soul of the Dragon, and basically this is a Batman movie, which is kind of set in the aesthetics of the 70s, right? So if you remember the comics, everything from his costume to afros and bell bottoms, it's all kind of set with a 70s feel to it, right? And so in it, you get to see a young Bruce Wayne, right, training, learning the martial arts. Because if you don't remember the story of Bruce Wayne, Batman, he actually, as a young man, after seeing his parents killed, decides to go all around the world learning from the most elite masters in a variety of things, from everything from martial arts to lock picking. He goes all around the world to train himself to become the perfect warrior, detective, so on and so forth. What's up, BGS? Got BGS here, Art of Ibmore here. Good to see y'all here. So in one of his ventures, when he goes to learn, another level of Kung Fu from a particular master, he comes into contact with a character who would become Bronze Tiger, which is, is a known character in DC Comics. But the character was actually played by Michael Jai White. So again, it's an animated piece, but still. I see you, Artisan. And in this piece, Bruce Wayne got the ass kicking that I never thought I would see him get in all my lifetime. Thank you, Shadow Dog. And it was hilarious because, Michael Jai White is right there voicing it. And it was ridiculous, man. It was as bad as what I just showed you with Clark Kent in the ring with Muhammad Ali. It was that bad. And there was no point in the film where even later, because this was obviously set in the past. So when they come to the present, they didn't refight and Batman win. No, not at all. That was just an L that he had to keep. And so it was funny to me that from Superman to Batman, the two elite superheroes, you have this record of black male characters who actually, were able to dominate. But you really didn't see a whole lot after that, for either one of them, as far as comics were concerned. But beautiful moment. So for those of you with sons, you might want to share some of this with them, just because I found it, mind-blowing and inspirational as a child to know that, there were even black males that had a martial arts background, let alone a level of mastery. I mean, that wasn't something I came into direct contact with until early 2000s, I trained in Sanukus Rue for a while. I did Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in the early 90s when that first hit LA. But then I did some training in Sanukus Rue Jiu-Jitsu early 2000. Shout out to Professor Urban Muhammad. But I found out this legacy of Black martial artists that were incredible and still are, but they don't get a whole lot of acknowledgement. So, oh, Brian, you said Jai White plays Bronze Tiger in one of the DC live action shows too? All right, let me know which one that is, because I hadn't seen that. Bronze Tiger and Lady Shiva are the best fighters. Right? Lady Shiva was there. She was in the story too, John, if you hadn't seen it. But anyway, yeah, check that out. And if you haven't, connect your sons with this legacy of Black martial artists, right? This martial tradition is powerful. So go ahead and check it out. These brothers have been doing work for decades, but they don't get the kind of press that others do. So not only in the comics, but also in reality. These brothers have been incredible for a long time. So go check them out, support them, take your sons in to learn. And if you're not in an area where you can directly access it, at least support them online, research them, find out more about them. Because there's actually a long legacy of Black martial artists who've been doing some incredible work and have never really gotten the press that they deserve. So when you look at the 70s blaxploitation flicks, kind of Jim Kelly kind of represented that era. And for a lot of us, that was our first real introduction to Black martial arts. But, there's a lot more. So delve into it and check it out and support those brothers. All right. I don't know why I left that one there. All right. Yeah, back to some of the mind-blowing stuff. This is an article that you can find on MSN.com entitled Ariel Robinson tweeted about white privilege before killing daughter. So just so you can get clear on what you're seeing, right? This is a Black family, and they adopted, even though they already had 2 boys, they adopted 3 white children, 2 boys and a little girl, right? And apparently, and I'd never heard of this particular show, but Worst Cooks in America winner Ariel Robinson, who has been charged with beating her adopted white daughter to death, tweeted about her 3 white children's privilege after adopting them to complete her family. Robinson, 29, and her husband, Jerry, 34, are both in jail on suspicion of beating their adopted 3-year-old daughter, Victoria, to death on January 14th at their home in Simpsonville, South Carolina. The Black couple had 2 biological sons. In February 2020, they adopted 3 white children, Victoria and her 2 biological brothers. It's unclear why Victoria and her brothers were put up for adoption, yet on social media, Robinson gushed that they completed her family and allowed her to teach all of her children equality by parenting them the same way despite their different races. But on January 14th, the couple called 911 to report that Victoria was unresponsive. She later died in the hospital, and doctors gave blunt force trauma as the cause. It's unclear why the children went to live with the Robinsons rather than with any biological relatives, but police are yet to provide a motive for the suspected abuse. She was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And terribly sad. But again, these are the kind of things we're looking at right now. These are the kind of issues, these are the kind of circumstances, and people are doing just horrendous things for incomprehensible, reasons, and I can't say why. I have no inside knowledge on this, inside information beyond what's been reported, right? But I'm truly sad for this little girl because there's nothing at this age that you can tell me somebody does to deserve to be killed arbitrarily like this. So, but like I said, this is the kind of thing that's been going on and it's happening. And again, there's not a critical eye on this, so Black men, you pretty much cross the street wrong, you'll be in the newspaper. But when it comes to women and girls as a whole, or women really, is a whole different question about what gets acknowledged, why, so on and so forth. So all I can say is I'm sorry to hear about this little girl. And, it's truly tragic and absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. All right. This is another piece you can find on heavy.com, but there's a couple websites carrying it. Georgia teacher Amelia Ressler masturbated on video in front of kids. Yeah, I'm gonna let that really just kind of sink in, right? Masturbated on video in front of kids. Ressler is a Georgia woman accused of 19 counts of child molestation after police say she filmed herself masturbating in front of a class of elementary school students while working as a substitute teacher. The 30-year-old Ressler was arrested on February 5th, 2021, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office said in a press release. Ressler was a substitute teacher at Mount Zion Elementary School in Carrollton, Georgia. According to the sheriff's office, investigators were notified about allegations of misconduct by a substitute teacher and learned that Ressler engaged in indecent and immoral acts while in the presence of school-age children and is being charged with what I mentioned earlier. Ressler was seen on video touching herself inappropriately in front of a second grade class. Carroll County Communication Director Ashley Hulsey told CBS. Class was being held in person, not over Zoom or on another video platform. It appears she was masturbating while the classroom was full of kids. We obtained video evidence because she videoed it herself and disseminated it, and we were able to get a hold of the evidence. Apparently, she posted a 13-second masturbation video on Snapchat that led to her arrest. The Exposure claimed to have seen the video and shared information about it. I guess the Exposure is a media source. The Georgia-based social media page posted a screenshot of the video showing a person they say is Ressler wearing leggings with her feet on the desk. Another screenshot shows what appears to be her hand in a mitten between her legs. Really? This is what's happening. Really? Masturbating in a second grade class. Y'all, you look. Yeah, AB, in front of a second grade class. Hey, that's all the information I got. Y'all explain it to me if you can. But this is the kind of crap that's going on now. So, 19 counts of child molestation. Yeah. All right. Now, democracynow.org recently did a piece entitled "The Assassination of Fred Hampton." New documents reveal involvement of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. All right. Newly unearthed documents have shed new light on the FBI's role in the murder of 21-year-old Black Panther leader Fred Hampton on December 4th, 1969, when Chicago police raided Hampton's apartment and shot and killed him in his bed, along with fellow Black Panther leader Mark Clark. Authorities initially claimed the Panthers had opened fire on the police who were there to serve a search warrant for weapons, but evidence later emerged that told a different story. The FBI, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and the Chicago police had conspired to assassinate Fred Hampton. FBI memos and reports obtained by historian and writer Aaron Leonard now show that senior FBI officials played key roles in planning the raid and the subsequent cover-up. It was approved at the highest level, says attorney Jeff Haas. We also speak with attorney Flint Taylor. Both are with the People's Law Office and were the lead lawyers in a landmark civil rights case over the deaths of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. So this was released this month. And it is a few days before, as many of you know, the film directed by Shaka King entitled Judas and the Black Messiah airs. I believe that airs Friday. Fraught with a little bit of controversy in terms of, the representation of the actors, the chosen story, but I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know how much critiques of the film have merit, to what degree, I'm not sure yet. But, they're coming to the table with new evidence that shows what many of us already knew. Right? So if you haven't looked into the life of Fred Hampton, please do so. And I will tell you, if nothing else, I won't say if nothing else, the brother was brilliant, period. But if you don't get anything else from watching his story, one thing you will walk away with is a disbelief that this brother was 21. I mean, he definitely had an old soul and was brilliant, brilliant speaker and organizer and activist in regard to his work with the Panther Party. So definitely check out the story of Fred Hampton. I can't say much about Judas and the Black Messiah as a film, but I can say the life of Fred Hampton is definitely an important one to study and to know about. And if you can get hold of, I think there was a documentary released about the FBI and the killing of Fred Hampton years ago. If you can get hold of that, check it out. I haven't even looked on YouTube. It might even be there, but check it out if you can. Right. Yeah. So, look into that. Support what you can in regard to Fred Hampton, and actually engage what he's actually talking about and question to what extent what he's talking about has changed in 2021. That's an interesting quiz, right? All right, Smoking Joe. This is from WashingtonPost.com. CBO reports find $15 minimum wage would cost jobs but lower poverty. The existing federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour has not changed since 2009 and remains below historic levels when adjusted for inflation. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would significantly reduce poverty and increase earnings for millions of low-wage workers while adding to the federal deficit and cutting overall employment, according to a new study from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The report is sure to animate the already heated debate over whether to include raising the federal minimum wage in legislation to help the sputtering economic recovery and aid vaccine distribution. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. Anyway, the White House proposal would raise the minimum wage from its current levels of $7.25 to $15 with increases of approximately $1.50 every year for 5 years. On one hand, CBO estimated that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025 would cost 1.4 million jobs and increase the deficit by $54 billion over 10 years. But it's also estimated that policy would lift 900,000 people out of poverty and raise income for 17 million, about 1 in 10 workers. Another 10 million who have wages just above the amount could potentially see increases as well, right? So this debate, which is a very old one, right? Because the counter argument is if you do that, mom and pop businesses are going to suffer. And then, of course, the economy is going to adapt, and everybody's going to raise prices, and the $15 is going to be the same as the $7.25. So let's not bother doing it. These kind of games cost people, right? But especially if you relate it to this next piece, which gives us a little bit of context for what we're looking at right now. So this piece here is an article that I found on kitchenfunwithmy3sons.com. Appreciate that. Thanks for joining Infamous Chillin', becoming a new member. So kitchenfunwithmy3sons.com. Basically, this is an article entitled Walmart Store Switches to Self-Checkout Only. So basically what's happening is you got stores like Walmart and Kroger's contemplating, right, whether or not to go to this full time, right? Whether or not they are going to go to basically whole stores with self checkouts. All right, appreciate that support there. I said it. Appreciate that. So Fayetteville, Arkansas is doing a new test for its Walmart. They'll only be having self checkouts at their store, no cashiers. This is a new experiment for them to see what works better. If all goes well and the test is successful, then Walmart will do the same thing in more locations and across the country. And they list the pros and cons. So, pros, of course, is that it's supposed to be cost efficient. They said one report found that checking someone into their flight at the airport with a cashier costs $3. If the person checks themselves in, it's about 14 cents. So, from the company's vantage point, they've been trying to push this one for years to let automation completely take over. The negatives they point out, of course, are that a lot of customers are actually against it, because they feel like they have to do the work and they're not getting it either. Others find the machines too difficult, especially the elderly. And then, of course, with all the technical problems, you end up asking for help anyway. but they've reduced their staff tremendously when they get a chance to do this. But to do so, particularly during the pandemic, is the issue at hand, right? I mean, automation is an issue anyway, regardless. But when you factor in the pandemic, what a lot of companies, and I think I reported on this before, appreciate the support, Sage. A lot of companies are figuring out how much more cost effective it is to work, to automate, to work online, to automate, to cut back on direct contact. They're figuring it out, right? They've always kind of known it, but now they got an opportunity to delve into it in a way that saves them a bunch of money, but of course costs jobs. Brand, appreciate that support. Now you could see the logic for it, right? And of course the pandemic gave them the excuse to do it, but the question is how many of those jobs will be available once the pandemic is clear? A lot of these changes are permanent. A lot of different companies, them being able to automate is a permanent shift, and it's causing millions to lose jobs and be out of the workforce. And I think groups that are already vulnerable to being out of the workforce, of course, are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. And Sister Warrior makes an excellent point. She says the alleged lower operation costs are never reflected in lower prices. Absolutely. Right? It's not. This is something that primarily benefits companies and costs workers options. And of course, that makes it harder for everyday people to actually support themselves. So when you talk about this issue of moving to minimum wage that I brought up before, you have to couch it against automation and what's happening in these companies. Because to cut back to minimum wage for jobs that are no longer available, what does that actually mean? Right? So yeah, and when we talk about Black men, we're definitely talking about one of the most vulnerable populations in regard to employment. Yeah. So keep that in mind, put that into context for yourself, and figure out what you want to advocate for politically as this impacts people on a day-to-day basis. Right? Yeah, I don't know how many of you saw this one, but this was real interesting. This is apparently on allaboutlaughs.com. Title of the article is Stephanie Mills. Sage, appreciate the support again. Yeah. Stephanie Mills calls for R. Kelly's ex-wife to be locked up with him. Claims the wife knew what was going on. I ain't heard from Stephanie Mills in a while. I really wasn't expecting that. But she came out pretty strong. And she didn't limit it to just R. Kelly. The article actually starts out with her talking about her and Michael Jackson. It says, with all the drama and controversy surrounding a few major African-American entertainers, Mills spoke up in an interview with The Root. Documentaries devoted to exposing and or tearing down the likes of R. Kelly, Michael Jackson, and others have been released in recent years. And we talked about this last year. This is a money grab in my assessment, where denigrating Black men for cash was a quick and easy way to go. And people didn't have a problem with it, right? So that said, Jackson and Mills shared a special relationship as they once briefly dated. She said, I loved Michael, Stephanie said in a 2016 interview with Closer Weekly. We dated for about a year and a half back in the day. He was the sweetest, most compassionate, most loving person, very soft-spoken, very humble. When asked by The Root if she would watch the HBO Leaving Neverland documentary, Mills stated that she won't be watching it because he didn't do those things. They said he was already clear. He went to court. So why are they doing it? It's purely to make money. So I will not be watching it because I don't believe any of that's true. I know for a fact it's not true. Then she says, however, when it comes to R. Kelly, she has a different opinion. I believe that R. Kelly should go to jail for what he's done. While she feels that he should pay for his crime, she doesn't think his music should be muted. She says him writing his music has nothing to do with that. Him being an entertainer and a star, she said. And those parents bringing those children to the show and then allowing him, I have a son, and it cuts that way, and then allowing him, and it cuts to, I have a son. There's no way I could take my son to a Bruno Mars show and say, okay, Bruno, you can mentor my son. I'm gonna let him stay with you. She says there's no way. The singer does feel like the buck shouldn't stop at just R. Kelly as it pertains to his crimes. She said, and I also believe that the handlers and his ex and his ex-wife and all of that need to go to jail too. She says, you cannot tell me that you live in a house with a man and you don't know what's going on. That's not true. I don't believe that. She should go to jail too, and so should the handlers that helped him. Yeah, she's Stephanie Mills ain't no joke. So she came with it. And recently, Lisa Ray had similar statements to make in regard to R. Kelly and even Bill Cosby. So it's interesting to see you have some of these celebrities coming out and saying things that a couple of years ago might have gotten them canceled, right? So there's that. I thought it interesting enough just to bring up because I was surprised it even happened, right? But nonetheless, that's what it is. So you can check that out if you so please and look at Stephanie Mills and what she has to say about that. Now, y'all know, whenever I have a white woman on the screen looking like a mugshot, which I believe this is what it is, it's you generally know what the subject matter is about. So I will go ahead and confirm for you. This is lawandcrime.com. Middle school teacher sexually abused 15-year-old in 2-year relationship. And the quotes were theirs, not mine. Middle school teacher in Okaloosa County, Florida, allegedly abused a 15-year-old by starting a sexual relationship with the minor, right? Haley Hallmark, 35, has been arrested. The defendant was described as not only a teacher, but a coach at Ruckle Middle School in the city of Niceville. Deputies claim the so-called relationship stretched out for about 2 more years, from August 2018, when the victim was 15, to August 2020. Kadash, appreciate the support. To 2020, the interaction between adult and child allegedly started with texting, moved into sexting, then became physical. Authorities said this landed on their radar after the teenager told a teacher at Niceville High on Thursday. This got relayed to the school resource officer. From there, it was pretty much a beeline to Hallmark getting put on an administrative leave that same day and then arrested Friday. Hallmark is charged with lewd and with lewd conduct with a student by an authority figure. It's unclear if she has an attorney in this matter. I can't tell y'all how many people I hear from that tell me that this should be different for female aggressors. Because 15-year-old boys are basically men, so it should be okay. And yet, if I told you a story about a 35-year-old male teacher and a 15-year-old student having a 2-year sexual relationship, there's no question he needs to go to jail in most people's minds. There's no question he's guilty. There's no question that he violated innocence. But when it comes to males, boys and men, not limited to children, there's no problem all of a sudden. Their victimization is not victimization, right? They're just, walking penises that should be available to be used at the discretion that anybody wants to use it for. Okay? Well, I shouldn't even say anyone, because if this was a gay male teacher who had violated a young boy, I think there'd still be outrage, because at the end of the day, the aggressor is still a man. But there's an obliviousness to how this is regarded in mainstream pop culture, in some respects. Because you don't really see a lot of these. I mean, these cases are getting reported on, but they're not really being put on major platforms and given a lot of attention. And I damn near have gotten to a point where I can see I'm reporting on them every week. These are not isolated incidents by any measure, right? These things are going on a consistent basis. And the lives of these boys, being impacted, nobody cares about, right? But this is what it is now. And it's ridiculous. And it's not ending there, right? This particular article is about a New Jersey substitute teacher charged with sexually assaulting 15-year-old student. Seems that 15-year-olds are in vogue. Appreciate the support, Drake. And now that I have a 15-year-old in my house, this is particularly... Anyway. Willingboro Township, New Jersey. A New Jersey substitute has been arrested and charged with sexually assaulting charged with sexual assault for having a sexual relationship with a student. Now, you see this? You see this? Sexual relationship. Had sex with. What's the terminology used when it's a male aggressor? There's none of this lightweight language. Nobody calls it a relationship when you got a 40-year-old man and a 13-year-old girl. Nobody. Nobody calls it a relationship. Nobody says they had sex. There's none of this genteel language. He's a rapist. It's in the title. He's going to jail. That's it. But we don't do that. We do not know how to account for female acts of evil. We really don't. Yet again, another story. She had a sexual relationship. Now they put that in quotes. Camila Kareem, 41, of Willingboro Township, was arrested and charged with second-degree sexual assault and second-degree endangering the welfare of a child on Wednesday. All right. Prosecutors say Kareem worked as a substitute teacher at the alternative school at Bookbinder on various dates between November 2019 and March 2020. Kareem had a sexual relationship, yet again in quotes, with a 15-year-old student who attended the school that involved multiple meetups outside the school, prosecutors said, without providing additional details. This is on radio.com. Yeah. What's up, Grinch? Good to see you. Yeah, man, this is ridiculous. Yeah, par for the course. Right? Yet again, we'll see how much attention that gets. This one, this is interesting. This is an article from AtlantaBlackStar.com. It says, you have no idea how hard it is. Black Louisiana deputy left haunting video message about police brutality, racist policing before taking his own life. Clyde Kerr III, a 43-year-old Lafayette Parish Sheriff's deputy, left haunting messages on social media about police brutality and the difficulty of reconciling his identity as a Black man with his profession before he took his own life on Monday, February 1st, outside of the sheriff's office. He says, you have no idea how hard it is to put a uniform on this day and age with everything that's going on. Kerr, a father and military veteran, began serving with the sheriff's office in June of 2015. He was served as a deputy on patrol, or he has served as a deputy on patrol, a member of the SWAT team, and a school resource officer in the Southern Louisiana district. In videos that have gained thousands of views since his death, Kerr spoke to the camera about police brutality against Black people and racism within police divisions. He said he no longer wanted to serve a department that did not care about people who looked like him. He said, I've had enough of all this nonsense, subservience, of serving a system that does not give a damn about me or people like me. Kerr said he can no longer abide by the killing that's going on, especially by the police, which I am. All right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to play a little bit of it here.
January 31st, a little bit after 1:30, last Sunday. So, here's what it is. I was kind of hoping to see the Super Bowl, this one especially, because we got two Purple Knights actually playing against each other. Mr. Tyrann Mathieu and Leonard Fournette. Hope y'all go forth and conquer, and I don't think it's happenstance. Sense of serving a system that does not give a damn about me or people like me, or just about life in general. And this is my statement. If this isn't something to state that this killing that's going on, especially by the police, which I am, I can't abide by this no more. I'm not having anything to do with this nonsense anymore. Call me what you want, try to discredit me. I have been a stellar deputy in this 5+ years that I've been there. My last eval's been sent, it's copied to somebody. I can't be discredited. Never so much as one write-up for maybe some reports being late. None whatsoever. So it can't be said that you know, I was a shammer or anything like that, or I wasn't pulling my weight. And just for contextual purposes, I just want y'all to understand where and what I'm coming from. It's my entire life has been in service of other people. And it's just dawned on me that this time, as of now, needs to be seized because you don't really give a damn about us. That is the truth. That is the truth.
So you can find that online. Apparently, that was released, like I said, before he took his life. Um, and he says at a different point that he says, my entire life has been in the service of other people. Y'all entrust me to safeguard your little ones, your small ones. The thing that's most precious to you, and I did that well. I passed security clearance in the military, but that has allowed me to see the inner workings of things. So check that out on AtlantaBlackStar.com. We've seen cases where Black male police officers have taken their own lives in the past, or at least engaged in a line of action that they knew would end in their own deaths, while speaking out on the corruption in many police departments in terms of how Black men are perceived and treated. So check that story out for yourself and come to your own conclusions. Nevertheless, um, peace to him and his family. That's all I can really say. This one on HollywoodReporter.com. Interesting story. At the new Marvel Studios film Blade, the Vampire Slayer, has found its new writer, right? Stacey Osei Kuffour, a playwright who acted as a story editor and writer on HBO's acclaimed limited series Watchmen, has been tapped to pen the script for the feature reboot of Marvel's vampire hunting franchise. She'll be the first Black female scribe to write a Marvel movie. Nia DaCosta, working on Captain Marvel 2, is Marvel's first Black woman director. All right. So, I did a review of Watchmen, and basically, we saw all the kind of gynocentric problems with the script, with the story, where you definitely alongside, the kind of centering. See, this is the problem. It's not a woman character or hero or protagonist that's the problem. It's with that is the coupling with that of this kind of misandry, this basic idea, right? That Black males are lesser beings. So, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is the difficulty I have with all of these different shows and movies and scripts is not that they're centering Black women to tell stories, but that they're centering them and purposely, right? Dismissing, undermining, and emasculating Black men. The two don't necessarily have to go together. You can have a story with a Black female protagonist that doesn't have to be a denigrating, misandrous trope in regard to how it treats Black men in the story. And yet they always go hand in hand, right? We definitely saw it with Watchmen. We're more than likely going to see it with Blade. I would love to be wrong. I mean, Blade was one of my favorite characters, especially after Wesley Snipes, who doesn't get enough credit for really kicking off this whole comic book genre, him and Michael Jai White. And yet you really rarely seen them do anything since this genre kicked into overdrive. Both of those brothers should have been leading men in this comic industry, but they haven't been, and it's ridiculous. But that said, much like Coming to America 2, I think we're going to see a gynocentric revisioning of Blade, and I think we're going to see it. I think we're already seeing it in terms of who's being tapped to pen the story. So I'm hoping that Artisan will jump into this one when he gets to it, if he hasn't already. But nonetheless, when these kind of reports come out, I just like to put them on the table and say, yeah, well, here we go. And so when the film comes out, if we see that it's, it's kind of what we've been seeing, we know why. Right. So this idea, this is one of the things that, I don't know if you guys remember when I played the interview with Chadwick Boseman's brother, not long after Chadwick passed. And they asked him what his concerns were. And he was kind of speaking for himself and his brother. He said the concern was really how they were treating Black men, right? Replacing them with Black female characters and really also coupling it with this Black female superiority trope, right? Whether it comes down to martial arts, whether it comes down to academics, whether it comes down to STEM, in these stories, you have a subtle, kind of consistent and persistent idea that men across the board, but especially Black men, are lesser beings, less capable, less intelligent, the butt of the joke, dismissible, you name it, disposable, interchangeable. The difference in the Black community, however, from other communities is that we see that interchangeability and disposability every day in real life. It's not limited to the screen, but it nonetheless is something that is happening on the screen. And interesting how few people are actually even talking about it in any kind of public setting. So, and more to the point, we see a little more of that in the next piece, right? Right. This is corporate.comcast.com. As you can see, the title, Honoring Black Women. Comcast NBC Universal celebrates Black History Month and the contributions of Black women. And this year they talk about they're going to focus on honoring the groundbreaking contributions and accomplishments of Black women. Despite longstanding challenges, Black women have remained the progressive backbone of major social movements, leading innovation across industries and achieving historic firsts. And they go on from there, right? So Black History Month to women's, month, March, we're basically seeing a drawback on the presence of men and the importance of them, but let alone Black men for that matter. Well, the reason I also pull this piece, not only does it kind of relate to the last piece in a particular way, where we're seeing this cross the board kind of centering of women and girls and a dismissal of already ignored men and boys in many instances. This one comes with a dollar amount, right? It says in June 2020, Comcast chairman and CEO Brian L. Roberts announced a multi-year plan to allocate $100 million to fight the injustice and inequality against any race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or ability. 100 million, right? We've made considerable progress toward this goal, investing in initiatives that address racial inequities, using our platforms and resources to address digital equality and education issues and disparities, and elevating Black-owned businesses. Through Comcast Rise, an initiative created to empower small businesses, specifically those owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color affected by the COVID-19 crisis, we have awarded more than 700 Black entrepreneurs with marketing and technology resources. Our work is ongoing, but this month we'll be announcing the next phase of Rise, featuring new monetary grant opportunities for BIPOC business owners. Now, look, I've said this since last year, particularly in regard to resources extended during COVID. One of the things I said was we're seeing resources disseminated on the basis of race, like this one, on the basis of gender, and on the basis of, race and gender as it applies to Black women. We have rarely seen anything disseminated particularly for Black males. And yet, when we refer to the data on a number of different fronts, and we'll talk about this soon, Black men are at the bottom, even beneath Black women, on so many different metrics. Yet I really haven't seen any serious attempt to extend any resources. And the thing about it is most Black men don't expect it. We're used to it. But I think the issue here, and I called it a form of anti-Black misandry, and I specifically named it as a form of social gentrification. What this kind of thing does when you finance one aspect of a community from outside, right, while ignoring another, what you essentially do is create a buffer class. And that buffer class is awarded for kind of detaching itself from its moorings within the community. Now, you do that for a couple of decades, and what you end up with, especially if you do it along gender lines, is a long-standing discussion about why exactly, women can't find dates, they can't find husbands. We're going to ignore the fact that the men have been drastically underemployed and undereducated in relation to them. As I've reported, I've done the analysis myself. From 1976 to now, Black men have literally half the degrees Black women do. And you'll seldom hear that even from people whose jobs it is to deal with this data. They won't point it out that way. They'll show you by year. We'll look at the rates Black men are going to school. No. Let's get to the bottom of it. We have half the degrees Black women do. We've not been the target, right? And I'm not suggesting that being the target is some kind of solution in and of itself, but I am saying when you have alien resources, and no, I'm not talking sci-fi, but resources from outside of the community, designating which aspect of the community they want to support, it creates a new class group, a new designation. And I would argue since the 1980s, that has been Black women. We haven't even talked about the impact of, oh goodness, I was just talking about this a little earlier. My pill just kicked in, a pain pill is kicking in. So yeah, getting a little loopy. But anyway, when you talk about double minority status and affirmative action, the targeting of Black women because they satisfy multiple categories, the preferencing in terms of hiring them, and hell, the extent to which affirmative action prioritized women in general. White women receive the bulk of the lion's share of the benefits to that. A program that was initially thought to target men so that they could actually restore families. Instead, it targeted women, and women actually began to conceptualize family without men. From that point, we post 1980s, we really just became semen donors. You can always look at the marriage rates if you don't want to believe me. You can look at the family structure. Yeah, we're in relationships. More Black men are married than Black women. But for the most part, when you look across the board in terms of childbirth, we're up near 80% being to single mothers. The family in and of itself is no longer really conceptualized with the man present. Seems to be the case. So when you look at things like this, the investments being made on material grounds, right? Resources, dollars, targeting most particularly Black women-owned businesses. I would like to see the data in terms of, these 700 Black entrepreneurs they supported. And I'm not going to argue that none of them were men, but I am going to say that you have these kind of programs coupled with programs targeting women, even though Black women were deemed very recently in the last couple of years, not only the group most enrolled in higher education, but also the fastest group expanding on building their own businesses in terms of entrepreneurship. We know 99% of those businesses have one employee, but when you can get a cash capital injection from corporations, and yet there's nothing earmarked for Black men, what is the long-term impact of that on the community and the family, especially during COVID? A $50,000 injection into a small mom and pop business is a huge deal, especially when Black men can't find any capital support at all. And we generally don't have an inheritance. Appreciate that, Jedi, right? This has a huge impact on the long term. And I've been saying this for the last year, trying to beat the drum around the extent to which these alien, forces are impacting Black communities in ways that I don't think we're really paying attention to. I don't think we are. But even when Black men voice it, it's still a problem. It's still a problem. How do I know? Well, somebody voiced a few things not long ago, right? This is off of AtlantaBlackStar.com as well. Title of the article is Ice Cube reveals he will meet with President Biden about his contract with Black America. Remember when everybody, I didn't even say everybody. Remember when there were specific groups of Black women that were calling him a Tom because he was supposedly in talks with Donald Trump? Basically, he's continuing with what he said then. Said, I put together a plan, consulted people who know more than me, put it out there. Illuminati, appreciate the support. Said, I put it out there and basically extended it to both parties. One party responded, right away. Another party said, we'll get back at you after the election. That's what he said. Then all of a sudden he became a Trump supporter. There were memes with him wearing MAGA hats and all kinds of. So here we go. Cube claimed last week that the Biden administration contacted him for meeting about his contract with Black America, which he has proffered to both parties. Cube revealed the news on Ryan Cameron's Magic ATL radio show in February. Said the Biden administration kept its promise to collaborate with Cube after the election. Let me see here. Has the Biden administration reached out to you? One asked, and he said, yesterday they reached out to me, although he cautioned that everything is still in the preliminary stages and any date for a meeting hasn't been set. He says, I believe it'll go down sometime this month. I'm going to make myself available whenever they're ready. I'm in. I'm hoping everything will be positive. Cube also said he wants to bring in some of his own experts and specialists for a face-to-face meeting should the sit-down be an in-person encounter. Yeah. So he's basically following through on what he said he was going to do in the beginning. And I haven't heard much blowback now that he's sitting down with Biden, but for some reason, he was the worst person in the world when he was going to sit down with the sitting president. Here's the thing. It's not about, him or anyone else supporting one party against another. At some point, we have to become politically mature, which means that our votes have to count for something that we have already pre-decided it should go for. In other words, we need to have a list of clear-cut, issues that we need met. And we need to put that list out to those who are in a position. And if they want our votes, that list needs to be met. It's a very simple framework. But when you cuss out the men who participate in this discussion, what exactly does that accomplish? I mean, I'm glad to see him continuing this, because had he threw his hands up and said, all right, forget it, I don't know if I would have been disappointed, but I couldn't be mad at him because he got so much blowback, and most particularly from Black women on the left who argued, all kinds of. I mean, you all saw the interview he did with Vivica Fox and the whole group over there, and the whole question about whether or not he had earmarked enough for Black women's issues, but he didn't differentiate by gender at all. And he could have. I got enough issues for him on Black men if we were really going to do that. But he didn't. He left it open and dealt with the Black community as a whole, and still got attacked for it. So, y'all let me know. Is he still a Tom? Are people still saying that? What are y'all saying? It is what it is. So I shout out the brother for his discipline and his willingness to speak to the issues that need to be acknowledged, and hopefully some attention to problems the Black community has, and him being undeterred by people that wanted to dismiss him on the grounds of him not including a feminist agenda necessarily. So shout out to him in regard to that, and it's much appreciated. And I hope he continues. All right. So we're going to transition a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to support a colleague of mine who has, basically initiated a push to create a documentary that is much needed. Check it out.
I told you to do Biden. Now we done lost a damn vote. We done lost a vote. That's gonna go to Trump. God damn.
I mean, when you mention Black people, you mentioning Black women. So don't count yourself out.
No, that's not true.
Yes. So support that. That's being initiated by my brother Green Gorilla. Support his channel. Go over and check him out on YouTube, doing some powerful work. He even went on earlier today, as a matter of fact. So definitely support his videos, but also support the push to develop this much needed documentary that actually puts the concerns of Black men into a coherent, cogent structure that we can watch and disseminate, where people can actually see what we're talking about. So please make sure you do so. It's much needed. But also, I want you guys to also support the Institute for Black Male Studies, right? I've been doing some interviews recently with a number of different people. I got a couple other interviews in the hopper that I'm going to put out. So, look forward to that. I think you'll enjoy some of the things I have coming out. But also, there's still classes being taught. There's still, different kinds of presentations being made available. So The price range is from free to what I think is a reasonable price for an actual 16-week course. You can go to the Institute for BlackMaleStudies.com to check that out directly. And you can also support, by purchasing merchandise, right? So this is one of the recent shirts in the merchandise store. And so if you go to the website, you can check that out and you can support through those means. This is our Sacred Black Masculine shirt. There are a number of different designs for this. This is the latest one. It just came out a couple of days ago. So please make sure you support because it's due. It's necessary. And I think a place where Black men can actually, provide research and data to explain their positions, to analyze the Black male condition is important. It is not funded by any major institution. It is primarily funded by me and donors. So please extend your resources, help out. There's no major backing for this. And part of the reason for that is to make sure that the voices can remain independent and do not have to rely on a structure that punishes them if they say something that is not considered popularly acceptable. So the Institute for Black Male Studies, again, is a standalone institution. It's not tied to anything or any major other institution. And it is a space where we can actually engage the field of Black male studies on its own terms and unbowed, right? Unapologetic for its position and what's going on with it, all right? So make sure you do. So y'all know the deal, right? So this was the topic for tonight. Black male justice advocacy, intimate partner violence, respect, and Black men's new rules. Right? What does that mean? There's a lot going on there. Right? A lot going on. Earlier today, I saw a video. Shout out to Kevin Samuels. He actually shouted me out in the video. He also shouted me out in his video on No Jumper. And he talked about some of the things I've been saying, that tend to go on in my classroom or in society, But this particular interview that came out earlier today, he was talking to a woman. I think she was about 40. And, she actually called in to agree with him on what he does on a lot of his work. But then she went into this interesting zone of talking about Black men as violent, abusive. And she was talking about the ways in which younger generations of Black women, younger than her mother and her grandmother, she was saying, do not have to confine themselves to dealing with, abusive, problematic Black men, the way their mothers and grandmothers had to. Kevin rightly challenged that. He rightly challenged that assessment, and he asked her where she got her data from. She couldn't say. If anything, she said, you always on that data stuff, And it's important to be on that data stuff. The reason being, we've seen decades of assessing Black men based on anecdote, based on opinion, based on personal stories. And I'm not talking about just in media or among the populace. I'm talking about amongst academics. I'm talking at academic conferences. I have seen presentations with 7 to 8 PhDs on a stage talking about Black males, none of them referencing data, none of them referencing charts, none of them referencing anything citable. They're talking about personal experiences with one Black boy or Black man, and that's somehow serving as evidence for how Black men act. Again, this is amongst the intelligentsia, right? This is what I've seen. And it's time that we actually, critically engage these things and take it to another level. Right, Sir Anthony, they hate the data stuff. The reason they hate the data stuff is it requires that you actually be accountable to something. Now, here's the thing. When you're data driven, it often means that you're learning something every time you engage the data. And sometimes it goes against what you believe to be happening. The question is, once you are able to fully kind of research something that you've come across, can you accept it and fit it into your paradigm? Or do you deny it outright? Well, part of the problem we've had is, especially in gender studies, right? These fields that engage, and it's not limited to gender studies, because gender studies is kind of a transdisciplinary, kind of field. So Most of the gender studies courses I had in undergrad through grad school, they weren't technically supposed to be. They were lit classes. They were whatever, they were classes that were made into gender studies courses by gender studies faculty, right? And the problem with that was that they had a one-way kind of approach to teaching those courses, much of which had to do with depending on strictly Black feminist narratives about Black men. No data, no citations, no statistics, just opinions. It's like reading a bell hooks book and looking for a footnote. Not happening. And that's somehow acceptable when it comes to that. But when you actually begin to challenge that and push back on it, and you're actually using data to make the argument, now all of a sudden data is a problem. Data is dismissible. It's a problem. But the reason Black male studies scholars are using data is because if we just get up and start, talking about our experiences with women, the first thing we're going to hear is, well, that's just your experience. Really? Well, I can sit up here and say how many Black men I've met that have had the same experiences, but that wouldn't be received well either. It would just be dismissed as my own personal dysfunction. And rightly so. If all I can say is me and my boys had these experiences, what are you supposed to do with that? Okay, well, me and my boys or me and my girls had different experiences. Now what? And so we just, standing there looking at each other. This is where, actually referencing information becomes useful. And so Kev rightly pushed back against this narrative. And it was the same narrative we've been hearing since the early 80s. That's become really kind of the programming of what it means to be, anyway, I won't even look. So the point being, he challenged it, rightly so, and raised a number of questions. And the focus of the conversation really kind of fixated on abuse. And her notion was that abuse was the primary issue that Black women in the past had to deal with, that they no longer really have to deal with because they have jobs that their mothers and grandmothers didn't have, and so on and so forth. So there's a degree of independence that liberates them from being stuck in the hands of Black males who only want to beat and abuse them, right? And so from there, now this was something that I was going to do this whole show on earlier anyway, because I saw this last week, and my good brother, attorney Dennis Sperling, did a piece on it.
With somebody like this, somebody that's disrespectful. You know what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying? This the type of shit you got to deal with, man, when a motherfucker work hard every motherfucking day.
I work hard every day. I go to
every
work
motherfucking day.
Okay, so I'm going to cut the sound in relation to the cussing, but you can kind of see what we're looking at here. 324 watching. Please, again, like, share, subscribe, join, become a member of the channel, support the channel, support with a donation, if you will. All right. But anyway, so here you have a young couple. The uncle is driving the car, right? The young male, the uncle of the gentleman sitting in the passenger seat, right, has been assaulted by his girlfriend sitting in the back. He's bleeding. His uncle is driving the car. And even his uncle, see, I said this earlier, we got a problem with assessing female acts of evil, aggression, so on and so forth. We don't know how to do it. So the uncle is saying, well, you guys are both, wrong, both a problem. There's only one person sitting there bleeding. And it got to the point where, as you can see, he's recording the incident, which is smart, right? He's recording what's going on. She's in the backseat showing out. She's still touching him. She's still yelling at him. Look at that. He's not touching her. It got to the point where he had to get out the car and ask somebody else to call the police because he was using his phone to record what was going on. In case you didn't know, this is abuse. This is what's referred to as intimate partner violence. And yet, the popular narrative is only Black women suffer from this in the Black community. When I show Black men that suffer from it, even other men will turn the critique on him. Well, he shouldn't have picked her. He should have known she was abusive when he first saw her. He should have done this and he should have done that. But strangely enough, when the situation is reversed, imagine him sitting in the backseat talking mess and his girlfriend in the passenger seat bleeding. And I wonder, would her aunt driving the car simply say, well, you guys are both kind of a problem? Or would she be driving him to the police station? Black men themselves often don't know how to advocate for other Black men. What we know how to do is turn the critique inward and then change the discussion. So in other words, what we've learned, having been socialized primarily by women, I've said this before, from birth, you take someone that's decided to go to grad school, they're going to go to school all the way through. From birth to grad school, the majority of the teachers, the caregivers, they're primarily women. And we're going to act like that has nothing to do with how men even define masculinity, define who they are. We learn how to extend a certain type of chivalry as a feature of our gender identification. Part of being a heterosexual Black male is measuring your value based on how much you extend to women and girls. It is what it is. But the problem is when women and girls are aggressors, we don't know how to categorize that. So what do? We critique other men who are being abused, even if it's ourselves, and we point out what he should have done differently. And that's where it ends. And I don't mind that we do that to an extent where we acknowledge what we can do better. But if that's the end of the discussion, we clearly have a problem. We clearly have a problem. And I've shown you article after article of women engaging in acts of aggression. And are they sentenced the same as men in those situations? Hell no. They don't even get as much attention for it. So here we are watching a video of a man who's actively bleeding. And he's clearly frustrated. But here's the thing. Again, he understands that if he just turns around and deals with her the way she's dealing with him, or the way he would deal with another man, more than likely, he more than understands he'd be on his way to jail. And this is acceptable. And the way she's acting, again, is based on policy. We're going to talk a lot about that. See, my argument is that much of this has been instigated by policy over the decades. When you know you can act this way, and one, most men around you aren't going to put hands on you. Two, you know your word will be believed far more readily than his. You know what this does. It gives an undue amount of power to someone who's apt to abuse it. Are we going to act like power is not abused? It most certainly is. This is abuse right here, not of just him, but of power, because she knows he's not going to put hands on her. She knows his uncle's not going to put hands on her. She knows the police are more than likely not going to arrest her. I mean, I've reported to you cases on men being shot by their wives, and the women were out of jail before the man actually healed from the bullet wound. This is normal and standard at this point. He got out the car just now. There's blood all over his shirt. So, if you want to sit here and tell me, and I've had people do it, I've had academics do it, tell me that men can't be abused, that men can't be hurt. I've had everyday brothers say, well, men can't be abused because I wouldn't take it. I'm 200 and something pounds. I'll do this. That don't have nothing to do with having a pot of hot boiling water poured on you when you sleep. It don't have nothing to do with your food being poisoned. It doesn't have nothing to do with you being hit with an inanimate object that has just become animate, thrown at your head. Or in an instance like this, strictly having hands put on you because she knows she can. But of course, the primary response to this that I hear most particularly from women, is I wonder what he did. Now, the I wonder what he did wouldn't be a problem if that's how it was actually worded, but it's not. It's not a question, it's a statement. He did something to deserve that. That's really what I hear most. He cheated on her as if somehow that's an acceptable response. If every man responded the way she did to infidelity, you talking about hospitals being overrun from COVID? The fact is that the abuse is actually pretty low when you're talking about men. But I know that's not what we've been conditioned to believe. I mean, we've been conditioned to believe that, men are just monsters across the board, and that anything they do is thus monstrous. So let's talk about it. let's look at a couple of things as we lead up to this category that I know this is a lot to take in, but I'm gonna go through it. All right. We're talking about intimate partner violence in the United States. Yeah, Barry, he did. Dennis Sperling did actually say that, legally speaking, you are allowed to use reasonable force to protect yourself. And that's coming from a Black attorney. If you haven't seen that video, go on to attorney Dennis Sperling's channel on YouTube and go check it out. I think it was a few days ago. It may have been last week, but you'll know it when you see it, especially if you've seen the video clip I just played, right? But nonetheless, let's go through it. So we're talking about intimate partner violence in the U.S., right? It says, in fact, from 1976 to 1985, this is coming from a blog piece that I wrote a while back. It's on my blog site, newblackmasculinities.wordpress.com. And in it, I was talking about abuse. I think this was the actual piece where I was responding to all of that crap about black men being the white men of the Black community. That's where the title, that Green Gorilla's documentary, comes from. But anyway, so I respond. I said, in fact, from 1976 to 1985, Black men were more likely than Black women to be victims of domestic violence. That comes from the fact sheet, Intimate Partner Violence in the African American Community, from the Institute on Domestic Violence in the African American Community, University of Minnesota, right? And then from there, it says most victims, approximately 93% of Black victims, were victimized by Black offenders. That came from Shannon Catalano's Intimate Partner Violence in the United States piece in the Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Statistics, 2007, right? So she says most victims, approximately 93% of Black victims, were victimized by Black offenders. This goes for men and women. Violence, in fact, is bidirectional and nigh equal, and in many studies, I think I should say. Shaped by poverty, drugs, alcohol, etc., violence is statistically more significant in poor areas and diminishes dramatically when income improves. That said, poor Black people's intimate partner homicide deaths aren't significantly different. Hence, Gaudier and Bankston's 2004 found that of those homicides that contribute to the SROK for whites was 30 and for Blacks was 92. In other words, for intimate partner homicide occurrences in white couples, the female was the offender in 30 instances for every 100 male instances. In the Black and in Black couples, the female was the offender in 92 instances for every 100 instances, right? So essentially what we're talking about in terms of intimate partner violence is that it is bidirectional. It is almost equal. And again, remember, Black men have not been conditioned for the last 50 years to report themselves as victims. See, that's saying, when you talk about intimate partner violence, abuse across the board, when feminists initiated this, it wasn't something that women readily took to. It actually took time and effort to explain to women what it meant to be a victim of abuse, domestic abuse, and condition them to seeing themselves as being abused. And I'm talking about those who were actually abused. They themselves had to be conditioned into understanding what abuse was. It was a process. It didn't happen overnight. It really didn't. Feminists began to push for policy, but everyday women didn't necessarily resonate with it. It took time. And then it took films and television shows and pamphlets and information on web. It took all of these things over decades to teach women and men and children, for that matter, to teach society how to identify abuse. The major problem was that we only taught society how to identify abuse as it pertained to women and girls, which is why there's a cognitive dissonance that seems to occur when Black males are victimized, particularly by older women, when prisoners are victimized, especially by female guards, or when grown men are victimized in the video, like in the video we just saw. There's a cognitive break because we don't know how to interpret it. We know it's abuse, but it's not really consistent with decades of films and television shows and animated series and professors giving presentation after presentation about how much abuse women take. We do not do that for men and boys. Ergo, it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist. And even when we're staring at it, it must be something else. We literally reinterpret the importance of the act when it's male victims. And then we got to a point where we started to develop a movement where we dismissed victimhood altogether. Now, on one end, that sounds great. But what happens when it's true? We're contributing to a narrative that doesn't allow us to even perceive the reality of what men actually suffer from. And I'm not even talking just about abuse. We can talk about so many different measures. But anyway, I'll keep it on this for now. Let's talk about homicide. Right? Use the National Violent Death Reporting System, right? You look at the participating states as they report data on homicide by race, by gender. Going back to 2003, all the way up to 2015, I put this in a blog a couple of years ago to show you the number of deaths. And the reason I did it is because Dr. Tommy Curry was doing an interview on Yvette Carnell's show. And in the comment section of that interview, somebody remarked that Black men were killing Black women en masse. Now, this is very reminiscent of the woman that Kevin Samuels interviewed earlier today. The argument was, it was an accepted truth that Black men were murdering Black women en masse. And one of the major issues that Black women have to deal with in terms of oppression is, Black male initiated intimate partner violence. This became the rationale for the argument that Black men benefited from patriarchy. The argument was that they could abuse a woman and not really be punished, which was absolutely ridiculous, because you've never met a Black man that if the police were called, all of a sudden the cops didn't really feel like coming to get him. Are you serious? I can't think of any crimes that Black men can get away with readily and not be arrested for. We're hyper arrested for anything. I've seen Black men go to jail over crossing the street, jaywalking. Really? Somehow we benefit from patriarchy. Anyway, so the argument was, we kill Black women en masse. We abuse them and kill them en masse. And ergo, their independence and support from the state is necessary to keep them from us. Let's look at the data. What do you see? From 2003, 57 Black female victims, 22 Black male victims. Now let's stop right there for a second. Sounds like a lot, right? This is nationally and against the population of 43 million Black folk. Still sound like it's en masse to you? 2004, 97 Black females, 43 Black males, and we go on and we come forward. 2015, 78 Black female victims, 94 Black male victims. Now here's the thing. When we calculate this against a larger population, a 43 million person population, this is infinitesimal. This isn't even a fraction. As a colleague of mine once stated, sociologist, says, as a colleague once told me, you're more likely to die in a flood or be struck by lightning than to be killed by an intimate partner in the Black community. So I just told you that the violence was bidirectional. The deaths are too. So even when you see, like if we go 2010, I'm just picking a year, 60 Black female victims, 36 Black male victims. Measure that 60 and 36 against 43 million. But see, the propaganda that became fashionable in the 1980s. Now, it was a variation on a propaganda about Black men that had been going on for decades and generations, really. But it reached a crescendo in the 80s, and it became very particularly directed at Black men in a different way than before. See, before, when Black men were denigrated, post-slavery especially, they were considered a sexual threat to white women, right? They were considered maybe a physical threat to white men, but to Black women and men were conceptualized as the same group. Then you get to the 1980s, and all of a sudden, they're not. They're not. All of a sudden, they're not. Something else is going on. And I'm trying to keep my cool, but I really want you to look at that. Right? The reason I want you to look at it is because we need to put this into the popular discussion. Black men are not the monsters that we've been created to be in the popular imagination. This is what Dr. Tommy Curry refers to as the subculture of violence theory, right? And this is basically, and when we had him on my show last year, this is what he talked about, right? He talked about how he actually identified the scholars in the 1960s and 70s who propagated, without using any type of data, these perspectives on Black male abusers and, you know, those who proffer violence. And then he actually identified the moment where Black feminists began to quote and cite from those scholars who did not use any documentation. And as opposed to the tradition of Black female scholars, Black women scholars who normally would have questioned that kind of data, this particular group, right, initially being a fairly small and obscure group, but popularized in mainstream culture by the likes of Oprah and Terry McMillan, their talking points have become, see, this is one thing you'll notice in the Kevin interview. She identifies herself as not being a feminist, but that's actually what happened in the 80s. You had this obscure kind of radical, and I don't mean radical in a positive way at all, right? This kind of obscure radical type of Black feminism that denigrated Black men and saw Black men as monsters on par with white society, meaning that Black male abusers and killers were somehow as rampant as the impact of white supremacy. This is why you could have The Color Purple, where you don't have any white folk in it except for the man delivering mail. There's no reference to slavery, really, and somehow Mr. is worse than white society, right? This rich man during the early part of the 20th century in a 2-story house, owns his own. I have to start cussing. Anyway, so that said, as you look at this and you start to think about the impact of these ideas, right? The ideas coming out in the early 1980s, appropriated by this particular group of feminists. And if you really want to know the details of that, go back and look at the last interview I did. I think it was in the fall with Dr. Tommy Curry, where he talks about it. And he actually gave a paper on it, right? University of Edinburgh. And he talked about it in length. And so he brought the paper to my show and we looked at it. And he talked about identifying the actual people who appropriated these arguments and put them into the mainstream as if they were somehow real. And so now you have 40-year-old college degree Black women, and I've heard this, it didn't take Kevin's show for me to see it, standing up to say, yes, Black men are monsters, they're abusers, you know, we're better off alone, we're better off not dealing with them, we're better off, and this is really what we see in popular culture, we're better off just linking with other Black women. And I don't even mean that in a sexual way, just, you know, the relationships with other Black women or what's going to redeem us because our men are monsters. You're looking at the data. What do you see? Again, against 43 million Black folk. En masse. But that's, you know, that's one of the tells when you look at propaganda. You can tell when it doesn't require data. When he asked her for data, she didn't have any. There's nothing she could think of, nothing she could reference, not even a documentary. Just nothing. Now, the issue that I have with how Black men are perceived and treated doesn't limit itself to just that. This is from a recent website I was sent. Boys Can Be Princesses too. I think that was actually the website too. I normally put it in here. Oh, there it is. Yeah, boyscanbeprincesses2.com. That's what this is. Right? Boys Can Be Princesses 2 project is a collaboration between photographer Kitty Wolf and Chicago-based children's party company Princess Capade's Princess Parties. It is a series of photos of little boys dressed as their favorite princesses, together with their favorite princesses. The photos highlight the pure happiness and joy the boys feel when wearing a dress and serve as a reminder that our own hang-ups, assumptions, and judgments should never get in the way of a child's innocent enjoyment and imaginative fun. This project is designed to show support for kids and parents of kids that choose to play as princesses, no matter their gender, and perhaps show the world it's okay to play as whoever you want, even if it's a boy in a ball gown. Now, this is clearly based on the Disney phenomenon, right? Disney princesses, they've been popular since the 1940s. Let me ask you a question. How many black princes do you guys remember? Anybody? Technically speaking, the first black prince you saw was in an Avengers movie. Just so happened to be owned by Disney. Chadwick Boseman playing T'Challa as a full-grown man. He's not chasing a princess per se, although there were, he kind of was in the movie that they finally did, but not really. Anyway, my point being, Chadwick Boseman, first black prince you saw in a Disney film. And I really don't technically count it because it wasn't marketed as such. I mean, the only time you realize that he was the Disney's first black prince is when someone told you. You didn't have to realize that when we saw The Princess and the Frog, that the first, black, kind of quasi princess character in a Disney film, you didn't have to be told this is the first black girl princess. It wasn't something you had to be told. You didn't have to see that. But when it came to a black male prince, which is interesting because all those films, whether it was a Native American princess or whatever, you got to see different kinds of men in different positions. Never seen a black one. So somehow we're going to get boys can be princesses before we even get a damn prince. I don't disagree, Sister Warrior, that Disney is a perversion anyway, but at the end of the day, as a parent, one of the things I've noticed is that when these kind of ventures come out, they have an impact on your child, often beyond what you're able to keep up with as an individual parent or in a couple, right? My son was 4 when his mother passed away, so I'm raising him myself. I am competing with every source of media, even the other kids at school. It is hard to compete with. So when I look at this kind of dynamic and I think about the socialization of boys, as I pointed out to you, at home, they're primarily socialized by women in single parent households. At school, where 90% of the women are teachers, 90% of the teachers are women, right? What did the gentleman say when I shouted him out in terms of black men teach? Only 2% of teachers are black men. And that follows through in college and graduate school. Majority of the faculty are women. This plays a role. See, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to say that it has an impact on boys because that would problematize women in some way. And that's just, you can't do that. You can't bring critique to women. You can't raise questions about whether having a predominantly female, environment has any kind of impact on black boys that might be a problem. You can't even raise the question without being accused of being sexist, misogynist, whatever. But if it is a predominantly male environment, then the question becomes, how soon can we democratize this space so it's inherently just? But you can't ask that question for women. So when we look at our boys and we look at how they're socialized, and it even applies to our girls, right? You got grown women who really don't know how to interact with men. And now that they're seeing a frustration that's been building up in men for decades being publicly articulated, they further don't know how to deal with it. But what happens when it's your own son? What happens when he starts to get frustrated, but he can't articulate why? Hell, what happens when he does learn how to articulate why? Can you handle it? We're talking about spaces like this. Spaces that don't even question if this may have a negative impact on a young boy. I had a conversation years ago. I was working at a center in Philadelphia, and my job, was I taught a GED course for young boys who were court ordered to be in my class. That was the only way they could escape the ranch, the boys' ranch they were on. They had to finish their GED, and if they didn't complete it in time, they had to go back. But one young man brought his little brother in. His little brother was probably like 8. We used to see him around a lot. And he didn't have a whole lot of men around him. So I remember I was sitting there, and one day he actually approached me and he says, I think I'm gay. And I just kind of looked at him and was like, okay, what makes you think you're gay? He said, well, I started touching myself. I said, okay. He said, now I thought about my friend. I said, your friend who? He said, I forget the boy's name. Let's call him Fred. He said, I thought of my friend Fred. I said, okay. I said, did the thought of your friend Fred's, did it stimulate you? Did it make you feel good? He was like, no. I said, were you touching yourself before you thought of Fred? He said, yeah. Did it feel good? He said, yeah. I said, well, what brought the thought of Fred? He said, I don't know. I said, okay. Did you think of anything else? He was like, well, I thought about playing. I forget what they were playing at his school. I know when I was a kid, it was like, what's that called? We played what did you just take dodgeball? It was like the equivalent of that. He was like, well, I thought about playing dodgeball, and then I thought about what I was going to eat next. And I thought about my friend Fred. Now he's saying these things in relation to what he was actually thinking while he was touching himself. And he concluded that he must be gay because his friend Fred popped into his head, but he wasn't stimulated by the thought. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is to say this. I don't know if you remembered, but again, when I played the clip, the young man who is, initiated the program Black Men Teach, one of the kids asked him while he was teaching a science class, out of nowhere, had nothing to do with the class, do you put sugar on your chili? And he laughed and said, no, I don't. These are kids. Their minds are all over the place. But he was making a judgment about his sexuality based on a random occurrence and what he was told from others that he's supposed to be. And what my point here is that him having a man to ask the question to meant more to him than I fathomed in that moment. Because he didn't know. And I told him, look, your mind, you're a growing young man. Your mind is going to be all over the place for all kinds of reasons. Just slow down. I didn't tell him he was or he wasn't gay. I said, just slow down on that and give it. And over time, he would come talk to me occasionally. Turned out that wasn't really something that he was interested in. In effect, he didn't identify as gay. It was just a random thought, but he had completely fixated on what he must be based on what others told him. So my point in this is that at the end of the day, if you don't have men around to be present and to engage young boys, especially if they're in spaces where their value is measured based on how much they can act like girls. And let's not pretend that doesn't happen. From learning styles in the classroom to who's actually doing the teaching and leading in the particular, environment that you're in, it's socialized around girls. And if boys are measured against girls and awarded the more they act in such fashion, and then punished based on how much they act really like boys, what else are young men going to learn? That being a young man is inherently a problem and should be done away with, should be dismissed. That's essentially what boys are going to learn. And that's what's been happening. And programs like this don't challenge that. In fact, they support it. They don't present these boys with a sense of what masculinity actually can do for them or be for them. They're not even around men in many instances to even identify what a man is. This is the kind of thing I'm looking at, and I'm just saying, at the end of the day, we actually have to begin to look at this differently. So, as I was thinking about this, crossed my mind, I was looking at the Manosphere on YouTube, and I noticed, that there are a lot of different camps, right? The Black Manosphere, you have all kinds of different camps. You have MGTOW, you have IBMORs, you have SYSBM, so on and so forth. And these are not limited to YouTube. There have been men going back the last few decades who have been acting these things out, even if they've never heard these acronyms. And they range the gamut in terms of ideology. Man, I got boys that are hardcore Pan-African revolutionaries, Black nationalists. I got boys that are diehard conservatives. They voice the same issues across the board, especially in relation to relationships, right? So that said, I've known brothers who have completely abstained from dealing with women at all in any kind of intimate way. I've known brothers that solely looked out of the country for mates. These things didn't take YouTube before they developed. YouTube just popularized what Black men were doing because they're responding to their environment anyway. But my point is, after looking at these different camps, I was like, well, what is it that I'm proposing in this space? And what I realized I was proposing was for a particular type of approach to policy and politics in regard to Black men, advocating for Black men. Now, I initially reframed it as a Black male rights advocacy framework. But here's the thing. There's been an ongoing tradition of Black men advocating for Black men before we named it such. That's why Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X are the thumbnail for this video. There's a long tradition of Black men advocating for manhood. Because here's the thing. We were barred from it. We were not considered men, and in many ways still aren't. Not only in the society, but now, in terms of the last 50 years, not even by our own women. We've had an uphill battle with manhood in the West. Uphill. It's been consistent. This is why I'm not denigrating men's rights activists. I'm not. But the agenda to just solely deal with this from a men's standpoint without qualifying for the legacy of race and the impact on Black men's lives, I can't do it. That isn't to say I can't work in combination with MRAs to do a particular project, but what I am saying is Black men need a little something different. And what I've termed that is Black male justice advocacy, BMJA. It is what it is. And it taps into a long legacy of Black men and the Black community to the extent that, there were instances when they advocated for men, especially post 1980s, but I mean pre 1980s, excuse me. But the point I'm getting at is there is a form of advocacy for Black males that needs to happen. I talk about relationships, but that's not my main platform. I only talk about it to an extent. It's not my main platform. I really don't deal with that much. I don't talk about, but I talk about essentially, and it took me until very recently to acknowledge that what I'm actually talking about is policy. So when you look at the things you see on the screen right now, right? You look at the things on the screen right now, these are all the areas that Black men suffer from. So Hannibal asked, can you shrink the group too small? I'm not following the line of the discussion in the chat, so I don't want to misframe what Hannibal's asking, but I think I get what he's saying, and he's asking, do all of these kinds of divisions, can they be a problem? They can. It's one of the reasons I don't really deal with politics and religion, as far politics in terms of ideology. I don't delve into it to too great a degree. Why? Because I'm not interested in separating Black men that much more. If I came out and said, yes, I'm a Black Muslim and this, and I'm a Democrat and this, well, immediately divisions. I don't agree with Islam. I ain't gonna have nothing to do with his platform. Well, I'm not a Democrat. I don't want to have nothing to do with his platform. I'm trying to bring Black men together, not separate them even further, especially on topics that we all acknowledge we're vulnerable to. And that's some of those things I've listed here, right? Incarceration, homelessness, employment issues, or unemployment, really, income, voter disenfranchisement, rape and sexual assault, intimate partner violence and homicide, media representation, and there are more, plenty. These are areas that Black men are actually in worse conditions than most other groups, including Black women. But we are not allowed to talk about it in the context of Black men. We're allowed to talk about it only in the context of Blackness and only to the extent that it is something that can be transferable to the whole Black community to use, to advocate for resources or whatever else. But it's seldom directed just at Black men. Hell, I remember even in grad school, when we talked about incarceration, we talked about it as a Black issue. Do you know, I never actually saw the number of Black men and women incarcerated until I had a doctorate and I was teaching. I couldn't find it because everything was related to the rates of arrest and all these obscure, look, first time I actually saw $60,000, $65,000, $60,000 Black women incarcerated. And I think at that time, it was upwards around 800,000 black men. I was like, wait a minute. How exactly did this just become a black issue? I don't hear that directed at other things. And y'all have seen me use this example. We talk about breast cancer in the black community. Don't nobody qualify for men, and men can get it. We don't. Hell, we don't even talk about men and prostate cancer, and the numbers are higher than women with breast cancer. We don't even talk about prostate cancer. On gendered grounds, it is either what impacts women or we talk about what impacts the community. This is what I mean by flat blackness. Other people use flat blackness in other ways. I don't disagree with the way they use it. I'm qualifying for it in a race gender context. Flat blackness in the black community has tended to mean that on gendered grounds, we can only talk about women, girls, and LGBT. Heterosexual males are irrelevant, even when the subject matter overwhelmingly applies to them. We have no frame of reference for how it impacts them. We have the same cognitive dissonance we have when it comes to seeing male victimization. We don't know where to place it. So if we acknowledge it at all, it's on a lower level of attention, lower level of severity, lower level of importance. It doesn't qualify. So when I talk about black male justice advocacy, what I'm saying to you is there are a number of categories, a number of issues that we have on the table that adversely apply to black men more than other groups, even within our own community. And we need to be able to talk about it that way. We need to be able to talk about issues that impact black males in a manner where we're overrepresented and actually not have to apologize for not including other groups, especially if they're not adversely impacted by it. Why is that a problem? But we've been shamed into doing this thing where, and no matter what the conversation, I see this with academics a lot, right? They'll present something, data of some sort, and they have to go out their way to find the balance with, say, women, girls, whatever, and they do it in a slightly disingenuous way. I saw a presentation once where a brother was talking about police-initiated homicide. Actually, I saw the same thing. Black Lives Matter did a commercial. They did the same thing. So they presented 4 men that were killed, and then they presented 4 women that were killed. Now, look, no disrespect to the families and the individuals that died at the hands of police or vigilantes across the board, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. No disrespect. All of that does need to be regarded, but we don't have to lose context to regard it. So disingenuously presenting 4 names of men and 4 names of women was ridiculous, because that's not the issue. Overwhelmingly, men die in these instances. Why is it a problem for me to say so? If 200 to 300 black males are killed by police every year and 9 black women are, why is it a problem when I point out this is something that adversely affects black men? And how is it that academics are so shamed into this that we're afraid to say it, so we have to qualify it in these obscure little ways to not appear sexist? But it's not sexist to point out what's true. And you have no problem pointing out what's true for women and girls as long as the data applies. They are overwhelmingly. If you talk about breast cancer, going back to my example, black women are overwhelmingly the recipients of it, or those who suffer from it. To deny that would be idiotic. I'm not going to hold a presentation on breast cancer and I'm going to say, look, these are the 3 men that died from it, and these are 3 women that... No. Black women disproportionately die from breast cancer compared to men. It's just a fact. Why is it a problem when we point out black men disproportionately die of prostate cancer over black women? Black women don't have a damn prostate. So that shouldn't be a problem to say if it's true. Why should it be a problem when we talk about incarceration or homelessness or unemployment? I mean, why? It shouldn't. So I'm creating a designation where we can. I am a black male justice advocate. I advocate for justice, not just men's rights, for justice for black men. Because our condition is not a few decades old. It is centuries old. The reality of what black men have been suffering from is much deeper than we thought. Hell, we don't even apply this retroactively in many instances. If you talk about slavery, for example, and this is one of the reasons when we talk about the black male political agenda that we created here on the Onyx Report, and I posted on my blog, right? A list of agenda items that black men, and I'm gonna pull it up for you guys while I'm talking, That's why one of the issues on there we talk about is a designation for reparations, particularly to Black men. Why? Because we know historically, Black women weren't even brought over here in large numbers until about 60 years before the Civil War. Well, that's interesting. I never learned that in class, not in high school, not in college. Nobody ever told me that. They presented it as something all Black people suffered from. That was just it. It was something we all suffered from. Okay, hold on. All right. So, in the Black male political agenda, we list a series of political ideas, suggestions. I don't want to say suggestions, but basically ideas that Black men have put forth about what kinds of policies they'd like to see, right? And it ranged from family court reform to, you name it, law enforcement. And there are subdivisions in each of those categories with specific ideas, right? Education, homelessness programs, right? Unemployment, right? Issues that are particularly or impact Black men in a particular way. Intimate partner violence, but ways that are not regarded in the mainstream. Health, small business support, right? These are things that we don't have conversations about. And look, let me ask you, prior to this list, how many of you saw, take this off the screen for a minute, leading up to the election of what ended up becoming Joe Biden into the presidency, how many of you saw a list of political issues as they pertain to Black men, written by Black men, for Black men, and presented to both parties to say, if you want our votes, Black men's votes, these are the list of issues that Black men have? How many of you have seen such a list in 2020? Don't worry, I'll wait. Now, I'm not going to say that there wasn't such a list ever. I ain't seen it until we wrote it. Appreciate the support, Reynolds. I'm just going to say I haven't seen it until we wrote it. Not to say one has never existed, but if it did exist, it was never popular. It was never mainstream. It was never even something disseminated amongst Black men. No, we don't know how to do it. So even when Biden and Trump started actually circling the wagons and occasionally talking to Black men, we didn't have any kind of framework to extend about Black men's issues. We didn't know what to say. Even though we voted to the second highest numbers in the election, we tend to do, right, more than anybody for Democrats, except for Black women. We're the second highest in the voting number, and we never even talk about why that is, right? Like voter disenfranchisement due to incarceration doesn't impact us disproportionately. We don't even talk about that. The idea is somehow Black men don't support the Democrats enough. And then the argument goes even further, where we saw prior to the election that Black men were somehow responsible for the failure of Joe Biden before the damn election even took place. And we were we were so irresponsible and childish. We needed to have strippers on polls to get us to vote. Word. But we're voting in the second highest numbers. Anyway, so that aside, right? We didn't have a list of political issues, priorities, things that needed to be done in order to court our votes. We didn't have one. Because we had never learned to actually conceptualize ourselves as an entity. Black women have, especially since the 1970s. They can articulate their needs in regard to race, but they can also articulate their needs in regard to being Black women, Black girls, you name it, Black LGBT, Black lesbians. They can articulate their political interests in a very detailed fashion. In effect, they speak for Black men and for themselves. Leeways, appreciate the support. They can speak for Black men. They can speak for Black boys. They can speak for themselves. They can speak for gay Black men with a disability who can't, you name it. And we sit back and we allow it to happen as if we don't have a list of concerns that women themselves would not care to voice. Trust me when I tell you, this list, Black male political agenda, It's not something that everybody wants to talk about, but most particularly feminists. And I didn't write it. I asked Black men who watched the Onyx Report to suggest ideas based on their own life experiences. And they did. Those are the Black men nobody wants to hear from. But they articulated concerns that are based on situations that mostly Black men share, contexts that we share. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we need to have a category in this space that takes what we're talking about and applies it politically, applies it in a manner that impacts our lives. But I'm not denying the impact of the personal, not at all. See, when I talked about new rules in the title of this presentation, what I meant by that is basically what you're seeing here with Black male justice advocacy is a requirement, is a demand for respect, but it's a demand for respect on political grounds. I am also arguing that we need to demand that in our personal grounds. Attorney Dennis Sperling said something when I interviewed him last on my show a couple weeks ago. He said something that stuck with me because it had been something I'd been doing, but I never said. And he put it so clearly. He says, I have a zero tolerance for disrespect, especially in relationships. I thought that was profound. I said, well, I think it's incredibly important that Black men learn to have a zero tolerance for disrespect in relationships, because that's not what we were taught. We were taught to prioritize women's worldviews, feelings, perspectives. Whatever she said, she has a right to say. Whatever you say that makes her uncomfortable, you're wrong about. That's what we learned. Again, being socialized by mostly women, we were taught these lessons even just on a subconscious part, on their part. You know, we were just taught these things because that's how they thought. That's how they saw the world. And we absorbed it. We learned it. We learned to prioritize their voices, feelings, thoughts, and concerns. We didn't even learn whether or not we had thoughts, concerns, feelings, and observations that could stand apart. Not going out my way to find things that stand apart from women and girls, but the reality is we haven't learned to talk about it. It's not how we've been socialized. So when we do so, it changes the discussion. A lot of people don't want to have that happen. So I'm saying, if these issues, that we're talking about, from incarceration to intimate partner violence, if we can require respect from the state, right? Whether we're talking about from philanthropists, from institutions, if we can require that from the law, if we can stand up here and say that Black men should not die arbitrarily at the hands of police because we're human beings, if we can say that to society, can we say that in our own individual lives? And see, to me, this is what Black male justice advocacy means. It means advocating for basic level freaking respect on an individual level and on a societal level, on an institutional level, on a cultural level, in every space that Black men find themselves at. Can we advocate for justice? Now, justice is at the larger end of it. I'm starting this discussion with basic respect. Can you require that, Black man, Black boy? If you're listening to this, can you require that your presence in people's spaces, your presence in their lives, has a cost? And the cost is at least respect. That's the beginning. Justice is the end point. The beginning point is respect. Can you withdraw yourself if you're in a space where you're not respected? Can you withdraw yourself from it? Do you have the testicular fortitude to do that? Can you? Can you require respect in your own space? Because you damn sure can't ask for justice if you can't even work on basic respect. But I am asking for justice. I'm asking, not society, I'm asking Black men, can you stand a call for justice? But first, start that with your own stance for a call for damn respect. And to remove yourself from spaces where you're not. Or at the very least, set up a plan to remove yourself and set a timeline, damn it. But put yourself in a space where you don't have to. I have purged everyone from my life who cannot fathom respecting Black men. I got a 15-year-old son. If they don't respect me, they damn sure ain't gonna respect him. I will not allow anybody to disrespect me or my son. And I do this for him as much as I do it for myself. Can you? Can you require that of anybody in your space, let alone somebody that wants you to protect and provide for them? This needs to be an agenda pushed across the board. Pushed across the board by Black men. Needs to happen. And if you can't, it's already a bigger problem in the situation than not. So that said, that's what I wanted to get across today. What I am pushing for at this point is a call for Black male justice advocacy, calling for Black males to stand up, to require respect, and to do so unapologetically. Unapologetically. But as usual, I'm going to be opening up the private after hours show, office hours, for my members. If you become a member of my show, go to my YouTube channel page, click on the community tab, and you will see the link for office hours. And you can come in there. Depending on the level of membership you've chosen, you can either comment in the chat or come up on the screen and engage the discussion directly. So you can look to that. If you're a Patreon supporter, the message has already been posted in Patreon if you're a member there. So you can go there and look at it. All right. But y'all know how we tend to do it. I'm gonna get this thing here. All right. Okay. So, brothers, be reminded, we are not criminals by birth, perennial rapists, incapable intellects, man-children, sperm donors, child support wellsprings, success objects, walking phalluses, ATM machines, lottery tickets, brainless henchmen, valueless assassins, pro bono mercenaries, unpaid bodyguards, interchangeable stepfathers, child discipline proxies, unpaid repairmen, workhorses, emotional tampons, or any other socially accepted dehumanizing stereotype. We are thinkers, inventors, innovators, leaders, fathers, warriors, and men. Embrace your humanity, know your worth, and extend your time, attention, and resources only to those who genuinely respect you. And remember, your worth is not defined by meeting other people's narcissistic, selfish, and unrealistic needs. You define your worth. Peace.